free Odyssey app. Live from downtown San Francisco, this is 95.7 The Game.
And a good morning to one and all. Welcome to Warriors This Week alongside Evan Giddings. This is Dan Devone on a Saturday morning in which the Warriors pulled within one game once again of 500 following their win last night over the hapless and the worst team statistically in the NBA, that being the Detroit Pistons. It was not easy as they squeak out a 113-109 victory. As I mentioned now, just a game under 500 and sort of putting that bad taste, at least for now, after that stunning loss at the hands of the Denver Nuggets, having to go back-to-back after that emotional loss to Denver. Again, the win last night against the Detroit Pistons. The homestand continues tomorrow as they take on the Toronto Raptors, a sub-500 basketball team, and then wrap things up with a date against the Pelicans. 113-109 is the final score. Ev, let's just bring you in. Following that victory, or that loss, I should say, at the hands of Denver, this was a game, I think, to be expected, back-to-back and sort of low energy throughout, but they did what they had to do, beating a team that had won only 3 times this year, handling the Pistons, albeit not a high-energy performance, but they'll take it any way they can get it these days.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where the Warriors are at. They survived. They escaped. And to do that against a 3-win basketball team, I was looking for post-game and kind of reasons to feel a little bit warm, feel a little bit mellow about a performance that was pretty sleepy, especially in that first half. Like, Dario Saric, I think, was the leading scorer for the Warriors at the break. Kuminga was the best player on the floor, but offensively, they just had nothing going. I think the teams combined started out 1 of 17 from 3. Like, both sides did not really show up to play, and I thought that the Pistons either dragged the Warriors down into the mud with them or the Warriors played down to the Pistons' level. But then, in typical Warriors fashion, they begin to figure it out in the second half, and they build themselves an 11-point lead with about 8 minutes to go. And then in typical Warriors fashion, it evaporates to the point where the Pistons actually had a lead with 1 minute and 41 seconds left in the basketball game, and it took Stephen Curry closing this thing out for the Warriors to walk out of there with a win. But I will say, I think you're right in the sense that is a necessary win. You cannot lose that basketball game. If they did, there'd be a very different tone to the beginning of the show. And coming off the gut punch of a loss against Denver, at the very least, you got back into the win column with a chance now the rest of the homestand to either climb to 500 or potentially above. So from a macro perspective, it's not like the sky is falling, but I'm sure a lot of fans, whether you're watching that game or whether you're in attendance, certainly didn't feel good about it, especially when Chris Paul goes down with a fractured hand. The comments from Jonathan Kuminga earlier yesterday, which I'm sure we'll dig into and were discussed after the game. But a whole heck of a lot happened both on and off the court yesterday, and it didn't really make you feel exactly optimistic about the Warriors removing the stench that was that Denver Nuggets game.
Well, I wasn't necessarily surprised. I think that was to be expected, personally. When you think about not only the intensity of that game, but the emotion, the way they lost, and the fact, let's face it, this is an older basketball team, and referring, of course, to the Golden State Warriors. And that went right down to the nub. So everybody was in that contest going right up until the fourth quarter. And I just don't think, not only physically, when you go back-to-back, typically you like to play a team like Detroit first, and then you have, your bigger opponent, that being Denver, on the back end. But it was sort of inverted in this homestand, and there, you knew that the air had gone out of the room, and there was just not going to be very much left in the emotional tank, and it looked like that predominantly throughout. In fact, I'm not a big betting man these days, but I think the line was 10, and I was like, I need to jump on that because I just didn't feel as though the Warriors just simply didn't have a lot, both physically and emotionally, to play basketball last night against the Detroit Pistons. Again, on the heels of a back-to-back after what it is that they experienced in losing at the buzzer to Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. I'm going to say this, just as sort of a theme to kick off the entire show, and welcome to Warriors This Week once again alongside Evan Giddings and Dan Devone. It is early, and I say that because we have to reiterate that this is still early January. We still got a whole month, maybe about 5 weeks into the trade deadline. There's a lot of basketball to be played. And just to keep things in perspective, and I know there's been a lot of ebb and flow, and we've been all over the place with his Golden State Warriors season to date. But the Warriors, if the season were to end, are going to be in the play-in game, all right?
They're the 10th seed.
They're the 10th seed. And obviously, for a team that has, the stakes are much higher, and obviously they aspire to do much more than just get into a play-in game. But just keeping things in perspective, the Warriors at the 10th seed right now and under 500 are not necessarily in a bad position, considering you're going to get what I think is your second-best player back in Draymond Green. When that happens, it could be imminent within the next week. But again, we're all sort of in the dark, having no idea when his return will be. But I think with his return and the infusion of the youth, that if nothing else have gotten an opportunity to play, and we could dive into Jonathan Kuminga, and obviously all the drama surrounding him and him not playing in the last 18 minutes in that loss to Denver. But with the youth and with Draymond Green and all these moving parts that we've witnessed throughout the majority of the first half of this season, or the first quarter of this campaign, I think only bodes well for this team going forward. And again, being within a game of 500 in the 10th seed with everything that dealt with including what is statistically the most difficult schedule in the NBA, and now we'll have the easiest schedule from here on out. I think that it could be, when we're looking at the season going forward, there could be a high level of optimism. But again, I understand it, the bar being what it is here, because it's the Bay Area and it's the Golden State Warriors, that we do these shows and everybody feels as though it's Armageddon and the season and the world's coming to an end tomorrow. But I think realistically, if we were to take a step back and let's all breathe together, that things are not all that bad, Ev, when you consider with the Golden States, what they've been through, and just sort of taking an optimistic look at the future, the immediate future ahead.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about is tempering expectations. And whether you did it before the season or whether you've been kind of forced to temper expectations by the roller coaster ride that's been the first, 35 games. I mean, we got a little under 50 left in the season. We got a long ways to go. And it does feel like there's going to be some change coming at some point. Of course, whether it's the return of an injury, you still got Draymond out and definitely suspended. Chris Paul is going to miss extended time. GP2 is already out for an extended period of time. So whether you get reinforcements from internal sources or whether the Golden State Warriors got to make a trade, and I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point throughout the show as well, I am kind of with you. Like, the Warriors are a game below 500. And if you told me that at 17 and 18, the Warriors would be missing Draymond for over half of the season, Chris Paul is going to be on the shelf, and GP2 is going to have played and not made much of an impact just because of injuries, I probably would be disappointed. But I would also say that's not worst-case scenario. And it's really been because I think of the play of Curry, at times the play of Clay, at times the play of Kuminga, at times the play of Pajemski, at times the play of different players. Curry, I think last night was kind of symbolic of where the Warriors are at as a franchise with it, which is if Steph has a good game and if Steph plays well down the stretch of games, the Warriors are probably going to win, or they're certainly going to be in the game. But you look at the game against Denver, and even though they built an 18-point lead in that fourth quarter, whether the Kuminga played or not, I think a big reason why the Warriors couldn't hold on to that game is because Steph was 0 of 5 down the final 5 minutes and got you 2 free throws, and that was about it. So the Warriors are so reliant on Stephen Curry, and he has largely this season been able to hold up his end of the bargain. But if he doesn't, and he didn't for a lot of the game against Detroit, I thought that it was a tough back-to-back. He's older. Clay was 2 of 9 in the first half. I think Curry only hit 1 3 in the first half. But then he woke up down the stretch and they were able to pull away. So, the Warriors find themselves in a lot of those basketball games. I think that was the 28th clutch game they've played this year, which is by far and away the most in the NBA. So it wasn't necessarily a shock that game happened. But you got to give me this, though, Dan. I think it was a little surprising to see it against the Pistons. Like, the Pistons are a team that do play teams tough, and I know they took Boston to overtime and lost. They've had some tight affairs, even though they're a 31-loss team now at this point. But that was a game the Warriors should have controlled, but came out extremely flat. And maybe, like you're saying, that was expected because it was a back-to-back. But to me, it was a win. It sure wasn't a good win.
Well, to put it in somewhat perspective, so the Denver Nuggets, which I think is the best team in the NBA, despite I think they're the number 3 seed right now in the Western Conference, but I think for all intents and purposes, when you look at their starting lineup, and of course the defending NBA champs, that to me is the one with the asterisk that everybody's pointing at, that the NBA championship is, or at least the road to get to the finals, is going to go through Denver. But just to put it in some perspective, they were in the back-to-back, and they were back at home against Orlando, and they got beat by Orlando last night. So, again, I think both teams left a lot on the floor out at Chase of what it was we experienced in what was just an epic contest. And look, that's a tough loss. And we should get into that loss. We could talk more about Detroit, but again, that's one of those that it's the Pistons, it's the worst team in the NBA, and they come in with 3 wins on the season. You don't take anybody for granted, but when it's the Pistons, you expect to win that contest.
Well, I mean, I think that's fair, though, because you're talking about, I think it was the way that they lost the Denver game that hurt so badly that kind of mars maybe what was a necessary win. But if you're telling me you go 2-1 against Orlando, Denver, and Detroit, you'd probably take that at face value, right?
Yeah, and again, the Denver game, why I think it's important for all of us to just breathe a little bit is that you didn't win, but again, what I think is the best starting 5, and what could be an epic starting 5, we'll see. History will tell just how many championships these guys win. But the Warriors had a commanding lead. And in fact, all 3 games this year against what I think is the benchmark in the NBA, the Warriors have been right there. And you can make an argument, should have won all 3 games. And certainly, the game that they played the other night was right there for the taking. And to squander an 18-point lead, I know it hurts. And I didn't take calls. I wasn't working the post game, or I haven't been on 95.7 The Game over the last couple of days, but I'm sure there was a lot of criticism and there was a lot of sense of, this is not a good basketball team and what the hell's going on. But really, if you were to step back and sort of take the glass is half full, you had a commanding lead over the best team in the NBA. And I get it. You got to find a way to close things, and not winning that game is problematic. But still, you're playing well against the best that the NBA has to offer. And to be where you're at right now, there are a lot of worse scenarios that you could be in. And I think Golden State, with the youth and with all these moving parts, including the return of Draymond Green, could be in store for some good things when you think about the second half of this campaign. But just to revisit that game, and you talked about Steph Curry, and I wanted to start here, and I want to get your thoughts. Look, Steph I don't even need to go here, right? He's arguably top 5 player, top 10 of all time. In my estimation, and there's a couple of variables and a couple of reasons why they lost that game and why I believe they squandered that lead late in the contest. First and foremost, to me, Steph Curry lost that game for them. And it wasn't because of the turnover. That certainly had a lot to do with it. Steph Curry shot early and ill-advised shots in the clock late in the contest on numerous possessions. Now, if you want to get back into a ball game and you're trailing late by double digits, that's the quickest way to let someone back in. If you come down on the clock, shoot something from long distance, and you're double or triple teamed, and it leads to a run out or a transition basket the other way, and you do that on a couple of occasions, that's the quickest way to allow a team to get back into a contest. And Steph Curry not only did that once, but he did that on multiple occasions. And I think that part of that was because Steph got bottled up by KCP, who has done a good job defensively on him this year, as well as Gordon, who also got up in his face and disturbed Steph. And I think Steph felt as though he had it going. It got a little personal with him towards the end. And as a result, he tried to get into one of those, I'm going to take over, and didn't involve the offense. And he just pounded the rock, kept the ball, shot it early and shot it ill-advised, and that allowed Detroit to get into it, not to mention the turnover late in the contest. And I think Denver did a good job of getting into his head defensively. But if you were to ask me, why did they lose? You don't do this often. Matter of fact, it might be the only time that I've ever pointed a finger at Steph Curry. But late in the contest, if I had to choose and somebody threw me up against a wall and said, give me one reason, it would have been Steph.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I said I think Curry's their most important player. Like, when he plays well, they are in basketball games. I think they're 11-4 now when he scores 30 points or more. And do the math when he doesn't score 30 points. Like if Steph is not shouldering the offensive load on a given night, the Warriors are not going to win basketball games. So I'm with you that the tail end of that Denver game was one that I looked at Curry and said he just wasn't able to close it. But I also think that if we're going to do finger pointing, like there's a lot of blame that can be handed out. Anytime you blow an 18 or 16 point lead in 7 minutes, it's not just on one guy. That's on the head coach. It's on Curry. It's on Clay. It's on guys not rebounding. I mean, they gave up like seemingly 4 offensive rebounds down the stretch of that game. Aaron Gordon had 15 points in the fourth quarter, and it was largely on plays at the rim. Like Denver got whatever they wanted. And I'm with you. I think Denver is the best team in basketball, and I expect them to be back there competing for a championship this season, even though that's a very difficult thing to do. But similar to Christmas Day, and it was a little bit of a different script. The Warriors, I thought, fought a lot harder throughout the totality of the Christmas Day game against Denver because the other night, I mean, the Warriors did give up 70 first-half points. Like, that was a season high. They were not good defensively in the first half and then, lit them up in the third. But, I just think that they were caught in a position, like, this is the way I looked at it. When the Warriors were on top and when they were competing for titles, that game is what they did to other teams. It wasn't a matter of if the Warriors' barrage was going to come to fruition. It was a matter of when. And Denver, I haven't watched all of their games this year, but they strike me as a team that knows when they can lock in and when they can't. And the Warriors, even though they have championship pedigree or they have championship-type players, right now they're a sub-500 basketball team. And that is what happens to sub-500 basketball teams that right now are kind of mired in mediocrity. You leave yourself susceptible if you don't close the door against a title contender like Denver. So while I think that overall the Warriors probably, I didn't expect them to win that game, we should be, I don't know what we should be shocked at any point now with the Warriors, because that was the 4th lead that they've blown of 18 or more points. And while they've bounced back and won each of the next games, nothing is off the table for me. And that's why last night when Bogdan Bogdanovic hit a 3-pointer with a minute 40 left and the Pistons went up, everyone in the crowd was shocked. And I was looking around like, why? I mean, this is a team that has consistently blown leads, that has been unable to step on opponents' throats all season long. Doesn't matter if they're great, doesn't matter if they're bad. The Warriors right now have an issue with closing out basketball games, and that's just a fact.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot like a lot of things in professional sports is that once it creeps in between your ears, it sort of stays there for a while. And I think it's in their head and maybe resonating in the back of their minds that when you have a big lead, there's that level of expectation that, oh, no, this is going to get tight because we haven't been able to close the door in these sort of scenarios. So I do want to revisit that Denver game because I think that that's sort of the focal point of the week. Welcome to Warriors This Week, by the way. Evan Giddings and Dan Avone have got you covered for the next couple of hours. The Warriors coming off a 4-point victory over Detroit last night to pull within a game of 500. The Warriors will conclude the homestand with dates against the Pelicans coming up next week. And then on Sunday, they've got the Toronto Raptors, the Raptors, who have been playing well, as have the New York Knicks since the big trade of OG Anunoby headed to New York in exchange for R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel Quigley going to Toronto, as Warrior fans will get an opportunity to see those two gentlemen up close and personal, as well as Pascal Siakam will be here. I know there's been a lot of conjecture that potentially he could be involved in a Warrior trade, and we'll see. That trade deadline is still a month away, although, according to Toronto, they'd like to make something happen or potentially pull the trigger a lot sooner than February.
They nearly traded
February
him to
5th.
Sacramento. That was something like they were the front runner for Siakam, and then as of yesterday late, down in the media room, everyone was discussing the fact that the Kings are allegedly out on Siakam, so that would leave the door open for the Warriors if they'd like.
But let's just stay with that Denver game because I think that there's a lot to get into because there's some carryover, obviously, with Jonathan Kuminga and the fact that he didn't play. I would, before we get into Kuminga, as we continue, I pointed the finger at Steph Curry, and some people can disagree, but if someone was to ask me, pick one thing as to why they lost, it was Steph Curry's play towards the end of that game, and especially culminated with that turnover in the last possession for the Warriors. But also, Steve Kerr, as you mentioned, he's got to take responsibility. But the second thing I would point at, it's just personnel, Ev, is that when I look at Denver, you can't double Jokic. And it was clear that the Warriors' plan was not to do that. They were just going to let Jokic cheat. And then it got just ridiculous because he was just getting wherever he wanted to on the court and backing whomever down and getting easy bunnies in close. But when you double Jokic, the best player in basketball, not only is he going to find the open man, but he's going to find the right guy. And so you're leaving alone Michael Porter, you're leaving alone Jamal Murray, you're leaving alone Gordon, you're leaving alone KCP. I mean, pick your poison. You're going to pay, and he makes you pay. The Golden State Warriors at the end of that contest, if you were to look at their personnel, if you were to just to compare this personnel for personnel, and part of the problem with the Golden State Warriors is that if you looked at the Warriors personnel and you knew that they were going to jump Steph Curry, but who's Steph Curry going to give it to? And this is problematic with this team throughout the majority of this season as who offsets the scoring for Steph Curry. And you mentioned this off the top. And who's the number two? You looked at the Warriors personnel. Kevon Looney was out there, as was Wiggins. So whether it's Trace Jackson-Davis and Chris Paul, or if it's Kevon Looney and it's Andrew Wiggins, or whatever combination thereof, essentially you have two non-scorers on the floor. Mm-hmm. Two non-scorers. And it makes it a lot easier to double team or jump the Warriors star, Steph Curry, as opposed to double teaming anybody on the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets will make you pay. The Warriors just don't have the arsenal to make you pay.
Well, and I don't think Denver necessarily has a ton of deadly shooters, although they can all make threes. But what they have is, even if they're not making threes, they have size. So they can get to the rim. Like, they can attack the paint with a relentlessness that the Warriors just can't match because they're the smallest team in basketball. I know people have made a lot of the fact that they are the number, I think, 3 team in rebounding, despite being that small. But to me, that doesn't really correlate with, being able to defend the paint. And the Nuggets got to the lane at will in that basketball game. I'm with you. I think the personnel right now is probably a systemic issue for the Warriors that also leaks into a lot of the coaching decisions that are made because while it seems oftentimes like Steve Kerr might be guessing or he might be a rotation late or might be a minute late, I think that a lot of that is a result of him not really knowing what he has beyond Curry on a given night. And even last night, Kuminga made the comments after the Denver game and after not playing the last 18 minutes of that game. He played 36 against Detroit. I thought Kuminga was good. He wasn't great. I didn't think Klay Thompson was great against Denver. He wasn't great against Detroit. Wiggins certainly wasn't great in either of those games. So I'm with you. They don't have a second option right now that they can consistently rely on for either offense or defense. Right now, there's nobody on the Warriors that you can say, go out and guard that guy, 1 through 3, 1 through 4 even, and that person is going to lock them up. I know even Kuminga, as great of a perimeter or on-ball defender as he is, sometimes can be taken advantage of. So he might be their best option. But outside of Steph, and even Steph is, kind of a one-side-of-the-floor player at this point in his career, you just don't have bodies right now that can match up with the cream of the crop, especially in the Western Conference, because I think everyone is looking up at Denver and saying, how do we beat that team? How do we match up with that team? And while the Warriors have played them down to the wire now 3 times, it becomes very clear that when it is crunch time, when it is time to go, that the Nuggets have more answers than the Warriors. And that to me shouldn't necessarily be a shock. You saw Denver do it against Phoenix in the playoffs last year. You saw them do it certainly in the finals against Miami last year, against the Lakers last year who beat the Warriors. The Denver Nuggets are a team that has chemistry, cohesion, as well as talent and players in their prime. I don't know if the Warriors have those things, despite them having championship players. And that's why I think, as we move forward in Warriors this week, if we're looking at what we learned from this week, to me there does need to be some personnel decisions addressed, especially after you lose Chris Paul to a fractured hand.
All right, let's open up the phone lines at 888-957-9570. That's 888-957-9570. Before we get to the break, let's just bring in Daniel, hanging out in the middle of the country, off to Indiana. Daniel, what's on your mind, man?
That's me, man, out here. I love listening to this station. Everything that you guys put out is good quality content. Just want to start something off, positive here. But I think you guys hit the nail on the head a couple of minutes ago, and it just kind of dawned on me. Like, they are matching energy with whatever team that they're playing. It doesn't matter if they're playing against a world champion and then they're up 20, or they're down by 1 with a minute and something to go against a 30-loss team. Like, the problem really, I believe, isn't the amount of firepower or the amount of artillery that we can throw at, because we have one of the deepest rosters in the entire NBA. The big issue is that we aren't imposing our will on the other team. We see flashes of that when we go on, a crazy third quarter run against the Denver Nuggets or whoever. We see flashes of what we are capable of if we have confidence and we try to impose our will. But we have to be willing to figure out, the rotation, give guys the minutes that they need. Because, the number 2 option, Kuminga, by far. If you compare him to Siakam, you're talking about 0.07 points per minute less than Siakam. And to me, what that means is that over the course of 35 minutes, if you extrapolate that's 2.5 points, right, difference between the two players if you give Kuminga the minutes. Now, does that mean it's always going to be that way? No. But what I'm saying is that he hasn't even hit his upside yet. These guys, the only one that seems to have confidence, throughout the entire game is Kuminga. Even Steph has, he's got his head down. You see Clay beating himself up. See all these guys, they don't have the confidence to impose their will, but I think that they have the ability to run with any team in the NBA right now as it sits without anybody coming in. They have those guys. Pods, TJD, even Looney to some degree, even though he's not giving you big production, still holds his own. And when those guys have that confidence and they're running at it and Pods is going nuts and those guys are just going and their confidence is on swole, they are outproducing the other team by fathoms. It's when they all of a sudden slow down and they don't know what's going on and they don't have that confidence in themselves and they're not imposing their will, but they're just trying to match the energy of the other team. That's why they had so many.
Good stuff, Daniel, and a lot to chew on. We got to get to a break, but we want to discuss some of the things you touched on, including Jonathan Kuminga. The rest of the callers, including Sabal out in Richmond, the rest of you, lines are open, but we're filling up. 888-957-9570. We're just getting started. Evan Giddings and Dan Avone, and Warriors This Week continues after this quick timeout.
In order for small businesses to thrive, they need to be smart, efficient, savvy, staying ahead of the market at every turn.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Seven Giddings, it's Dan Devone. Warriors This Week as Golden State concludes another turbulent 7 days with a victory over the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons come in as the worst team in the NBA, but still a game that was hanging right in the balance. What else would you expect? And the Warriors do pull it out with a win by 4. I think you mentioned that this is a team that leads the NBA in playing in 28 clutch games this year. A clutch game defined by, I believe, a game that's decided by 5 or less points. Is that correct?
In the last 5 minutes.
In the last 5 minutes of the contest.
So at any point, if you're within 5, it becomes a clutch game. And the Warriors, boy, yeah, they find themselves in a lot of clutch games, Dan, and they haven't been clutch all the time. I think they're like 500 in those games now, by the way, 14-14.
An opportunity to get at 500 when they take on the Toronto Raptors right here on 95.7 The Game, beginning with the pregame show, and then tip is at 5:30. All right, the lines are backing up. We want to get back out and take some of the calls, beginning with Filmo Mike, hanging out in San Francisco, one of our regulars. Filmo, what's on your mind this week?
Hey, man, I'm not going to lie. First of all, Dan Devon, you give up real Keanu Reeves energy. You just remind me of Keanu Reeves. I don't know why.
I'll take it.
But Steve Kerr, man, I'm not feeling Kerr this morning. I went to sleep. I called Evan last night, and I was like, man, there's something wrong with Kerr. He was talking connectivity all off season. He's capping. He has no pulse of the team. He has no pulse. He's coaching reactionary. Oh, he's mad. I'm going to put him in 36 minutes. Come on, bro. Kuminga didn't even have that great of a game. The game you supposed to play in 36 minutes, man, you played him 18 minutes. No connectivity. The game you supposed to play Moody in, you sat him down when he was on the heater. no connectivity. You know what Kerr used to say? This is something that Kerr used to say. You got to play with force. You got to coach with force. You coaching like a punk. I'm so mad at what's wrong with him? He's a role player. He came off the bench for 15, 20 years. Don't you think that these players that were better than you need some type of rhythm, bro? Come on, man. Like, I'm not feeling Kerr right now, man. I don't like the direction. I ain't liking it. His body language is throwing me off. I don't know if you tired, bro, go sit down. Let the dude that used to coach the New Jersey Nets coach. I forgot his name, but he was finna go to Charlotte. Let him coach, man.
Yeah.
Get up out of here, man. You acting late. I don't know what's wrong with Kerr. Something's wrong with him, man. He's caught in the Matrix. Keanu Reeves.
His second Keanu Reeves reference. And Philmo, way to bring it today, because you know what? The anger is understood, and I think it's not only understood, but it comes with some level of validity when he's talking about. And I'm just going to assume that a lot of that passion is what he did with Jonathan Kuminga, and I think that as Philmo referred to the 36 minutes that Jonathan Kuminga got last night, I think that's Kerr's way of saying that I made a mistake. Now, he admitted publicly after pulling Moses Moody, remember in that game about a month ago against Sacramento, and he put in Klay Thompson, and that was the first indicator that, you look a little too comfortable with your veterans. Why'd you pull Moody? He was playing so well. And then Steve Kerr publicly afterwards saying, you know what? That was on me. I think as a head coach, you can't say that too frequently, because then it becomes, all right, well, if you continue to make these mistakes, well then, some people are already putting him on the hot seat, but that clearly is going to put you and your job in jeopardy. But that was him sort of indirectly saying, you know what, guys, I screwed up. He only played 19 minutes in a loss to the Denver Nuggets in which we squandered an 18-point lead, and I'm giving 36 minutes of run against the Detroit Pistons. How'd you see it, Ev?
Yeah, I'm with Philmo, and to his point, we kind of discussed this on Warriors wrap-up last night. I do think Kerr has been more reactionary than any of his years as head coach. I also think he's had to be, because I don't think even, I don't know about you, Dan, when you watch this team, do you have any idea what consistently you're going to see from this group outside of Steph and Curry?
There's no identity aside from Steph.
So, and some of that is on the head coach. Generally, teams follow their leader, but Steve Kerr has always been someone that is pretty laissez-faire, pretty laid back. I mean, he admitted pregame that his door is open more than any other head coach in the NBA. And to me, that was kind of a plea like, hey, Kuminga, instead of going public with this and telling your camp about yada, yada, come to me first. And Curry also mentioned that as well, which we can, kind of get into later on. But I think sticking with Steve Kerr, he has been in the most difficult position he's ever been. And that's not an excuse. I don't think he's responded necessarily well. But if you look at, we were talking about the macro, right? So if you look at all the decisions that he's made this year and you pile them up, I don't think if you looked at it now, you'd say, well, Kuminga played 36 minutes against the Pistons. That wasn't a bad thing. But again, that wasn't the spot for it. Kuminga was scoreless in the second half and had 3 turnovers. Now, he's probably the Warriors' best option against a team like that wants to get up and down the floor. But if Kerr is really the kind of coach that is going to have to ride hot hands and play with momentum, Kuminga was, to Philmo's point, that wasn't the game for him to play 36. The game for him to play a lot was against the Nuggets. And for him to also come out and admit, Kerr I'm talking about, that he looked at the box score and said, I didn't realize Kuminga only played 18 minutes. I think that means that Kuminga, up until the Denver game, just wasn't a priority for him. And that kind of is a problem, because I don't know who's a priority for Steve Kerr right now on the Warriors. Outside of Steph and Curry, it appears Klay Thompson's a priority, but then sometimes he doesn't close games. I think Andrew Wiggins, he wants to be a priority because he's a champion, but he hasn't shown himself to play with any seldom form of consistency. So, I don't know who Kerr prioritizes on a given night, and maybe the fact that they have so many injuries now to key rotational positions will help shrink that rotation, will help provide some clarity, and eventually get us to the point where we do have an identity for the Golden State Warriors, because I don't think they're close right now, and I think it's a big reason why they're a game below 500. So I don't think Kerr has done necessarily a great job this year, righting those wrongs, but I also don't think it's been very easy for him to do so because you got so many question marks. You got so many different agendas at different points this seasons. You got players that are getting suspended. You got players that are getting hurt. And I know that that's the real NBA, but it doesn't make it any easier. So, I'm not trying to come off and say like there's an excuse for Kerr, sticking himself into some games and not coaching well. But gosh, I mean, like last night, and there's been multiple games like this season, and even against Denver at points, when you have 3 or 4 of your players not playing well on the floor, it's not like you can just make a line change and say, hey, guys, go and get in there. Now, I think there's a question about, well, maybe if one player isn't playing well, could you replace them with Moses Moody, who's getting DNPs? There are players you can go to. But, I mean, this Warriors team, to me, has bigger problems than the coaching staff. Or, I should say, the coaching staff is a part of the larger issue with the Warriors right now.
They're a part of it, but I still maintain that this is a players' league. So to your point, it makes it a lot easier to prioritize players when they're going well. Like, it's easy to say, okay, I'm going to play you because you deserve the minutes. Like, you can make the decisions a lot easier on Steve Kerr, Andrew Wiggins, if you just played better right from the jump. All right, back out to the phone lines. Sabal has been hanging on for a while. Richmond, California. Sabala, what's on your mind today?
Thanks for taking the call. I love the show. And I love the Warriors, and it's just heartbreaking and so frustrating right now. But one of the things that I just have observed again and again is they have no players who are in their prime, right? They have young players who have a lot of promise but are not fully developed. And they have older players who, were superb a few years ago but are on the decline, and I think I would put Steph in that same bucket. And what that means is, there's no margin for error. Like, if any one thing starts to go wrong, then the whole thing starts to fall apart. And I don't know how you solve for that. At times I feel angry at Kerr, but I also have a lot of sympathy for him just because it's like this team they don't have players in their prime, and they don't have like a hub of the wheel. You can't build a wheel without the hub. They don't have a core, mentally, physically, in terms of skill, who's on the court, emotionally. Like, their quote unquote core players like Draymond are like popping off, with anger, rage issues, and then indefinitely suspended. How is anyone supposed to build this machine when you don't have like the essential framework in place? So I don't know. It's early in the season, I guess, and I like hearing the optimism at the top of the show. It makes me feel better as a fan and helps me just like take a beat, take a breath, and cool down. But when you have just like a razor thin margin for error in the NBA, I don't know I don't know how you pull together a great season when it's kind of like a house of cards.
Sabala, boom. You're right on. When you talk about a team not in its prime, you couldn't be more spot on. And let's go back to the Denver game and think about Denver when you talk about prime players. And a lot of this is just that's where you're at, and that's when you win titles. When you look at their core three, you're talking about guys 25 to 28 years of age. In the Joker, Jamal Murray, and Michael Porter Jr. The Golden State Warriors are either guys in their mid-30s that are beginning to descend down the bottom of the mountain, if you will, they've already peaked, and you can clearly see it aside from Steph, who's sort of an outlier physically, or they're too young in the Jonathan Kumingas and the Brandon Pajimskis, who are just maybe 2 or 3 years away. And you don't have that sweet spot. There's maybe 2 players. Wiggins is one of those that's in the late 20s and sort of right in that. And Kevon Looney, although Kevon Looney oftentimes looks like a player who's a lot older than he is. But those are 2 guys that you would categorize being in their prime. Aside from that, the Warriors are one or the other. They're either too old or they're too young.
No, I'm with you. And you even look at Wiggins and Looney, like, I guess logically you'd say at age 30, Wiggins is in his prime, but this is his 10th or 11th year in the NBA. Like, he's probably on the downside. He was in his prime 2 years ago, I believe, when he was playing his best basketball in the finals. And then Kevon Looney is a guy that he's only 27 years old, but some guys peak earlier than others. Kevon Looney was also a guy who came out of college as a freshman. He came to the league at age 19. He's dealt with some injuries early in his career. He looks like he's also kind of on the back end. So they might be the closest to their primes, but they're definitely, I would say, over the hill, so to speak. Meanwhile, the Nuggets, they're in the thick of things. Like Jamal Murray is playing the best basketball of his career. Nikola Jokic is maintaining the level that he set after his back-to-back MVP seasons. Michael Porter Jr. is peaking. Aaron Gordon certainly is a better player than he was a few years in Orlando. That's fair. But let me ask you this. I mean, and I'll throw this to the callers as well, 888-957-9570. Are you expecting this team to make a run at a championship? Because as currently constructed, I'm not. And I think I was a bit optimistic entering the season that they might be able to challenge for the 4 seed. Like, my goal for this team coming into the year was to get a home playoff series. That is looking increasingly less likely by the day, but it doesn't mean that I don't think that if Draymond comes back or GP2 comes back or even Chris Paul now is going to miss a lot of time, if the Warriors find a way to kind of, I guess, take advantage of the non-crowded roster just because of injury, I don't think it's out of the question to think that they could challenge for a 6, maybe even a 5 seed, and then you try and become a dangerous dark horse team in the playoffs and see what happens. Like, I don't think the path is very clear for the Warriors to a title, but I think that's also where the trade deadline comes in. I think that there is a few weeks for the Warriors to experiment with certain lineups, a la Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga, maybe Moses Moody. Like, I think the Warriors need to find out what they have with their wings prior to the trade deadline. And they also need to figure out what direction they want to go in. Like, you're talking about primes, right? Okay, so the Warriors don't have any players in their primes. Which way do you want to go? Do you want to lean younger and try and invest in those players and their development so that when they do hit their prime, that you feel like you have a chance to compete? Or do you want to do what you did this offseason, which is continue to lean into the older guys by flipping a 23-year-old for a 38-year-old? Like, you do need to make a choice, and I think that's kind of what the trade deadline to me symbolizes, is a chance for the Warriors to either say, this season we are going to lean into our veterans and give them one last chance, or we're going to start to make moves towards the future. And you can also do that in the offseason, but I think you do need to give a direction to the franchise of which way this thing is going, because I think we're seeing that battle on a nightly basis with rotations and Steve Kerr, and there doesn't seem to be a real answer as to where the Warriors, like, they're stuck. You know, we talked about 2 timelines for a long time. I don't think they have 2 timelines necessarily, but they certainly don't have one aligned timeline right now.
Chris is in Oakland, California. Hello, Chris. Welcome aboard.
Hey, how you guys doing, man? Good to talk to you, Devon. Good to talk to you, Evan, man. Thanks for taking my call. I just wanted to go back and touch on what Philmo Mike was saying earlier, and Kerr's indecisiveness. And I wholeheartedly agree. He's coaching more reactionary, especially with the lineups. And I think that he's overthinking things. I mean, you know, like earlier in the season before it started, he said that he had like 6 starters. I mean, I think that's where he started overthinking things. I mean, as far as identity goes, we know who the identity is. It's Stephen Clay, motion offense, move the ball. And as far as defense goes, it's defending without fouling, right? And we always had a closing lineup. We always had the death lineup, going back to Harrison Barnes, and then you sub in Barnes for KD and Iguodala, and then the most recent closing lineup was with JP and Wiggins and Draymond Green. We don't have that this year. That's why we're losing these games at the end. We don't have like this closing lineup, and Kerr just needs to be more decisive on who's going to be on the floor to win. And I'm just not sure what's going on with that. But thanks, guys. Have a good day. Peace.
Chris, you know, you make a good point. You know, Ev, if this was 9-on-9 and you played 6 quarters, it'd make Kerr's job a lot easier. But every night it's like a Cirque du Soleil juggling act, you know? He's throwing 3 chairs and 4 balls in the air because he's got to appease like 12 guys, which is not easy to do. And as much as you don't want to lose GP2 and you don't want to see Chris Paul go down with an injury, but in a weird way, inadvertently, it makes his job a little bit easier.
Yeah, no, I'm with you because you got 30 more minutes now from Chris Paul to redistribute per game. You probably got 15 minutes to redistribute for GP2, and then you were already dealing with Draymond Green being out. So yeah, it makes things a lot more clear. I don't necessarily know if it makes the Warriors better. Now, if you subscribe to the thought of, well, Steve Kerr is the reason why the Warriors are blowing late leads, or his rotations are the reasons why they're losing these close games, well then shrinking the rotation due to injury should help that, because he shouldn't have the option to go to a vet in a certain spot, or he shouldn't have the option to not play a particular young player. But I don't think it necessarily gets rid of the larger issue, which is they're kind of a mediocre roster right now that is beginning to find out what they have in some younger players, but I don't think that those guys are necessarily ready yet to affect and impact winning basketball on a consistent night in and night out basis. Like Kuminga should have played the rest of the Denver game. Or should have played at some point in the last 18 minutes of the Denver game. That was a mistake. But we saw last night against Detroit, who's a 3-win basketball team, Kuminga played 36 minutes, and he was good. He was a contributing factor to why they won. But the reason why they won the game down the stretch is because Steph scored 14 of the last 16 points. It's because Klay Thompson had a couple of big key defensive stops down the stretch. Like, you still need your stars or your guys who have been there and done that to carry you. And to me, the Warriors go more than ever as Curry does. And while I love JK, and I think Moody's a good piece as well, I think Pods is contributing. TJD looks solid, especially in the second quarter last night, and had some good run against Denver. Like, those players are ancillary to the Warriors' stars. And right now, the Warriors' stars have been up and down as well. So we're questioning the rotations on a nightly basis. But to me, it comes down to what Curry gives you. And if he can't give you consistently top 5, top 10 player, level basketball, well, then I just don't think Kerr's going to be able to solve that issue. Like, I don't think Kerr mixing and matching and puzzle piecing games together is going to be the deciding factor. So I would love to see more of Kuminga. I would love to see any of Moses Moody, but I'm not expecting those guys to come in and be game changers, I think, the way that people are expecting them to. Because at the end of the day, they're 21, 22 years old. They're not ready yet, to me, to carry a franchise. And I would hope that those players could be, third or fourth options. But the Warriors don't even have a number 2 option right now, which is a bigger concern to me.
Oakland, California, once again. And Daryl joins us. Hey, Daryl.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call, and good morning. I'm listening to you talk, and they don't really have there's such a discrepancy between the older guys and the younger guys, and I think part of it is because they had a few drafts where it was hollowed out in terms of the Evans and the Patrick McCaws, guys that would be in their prime right now. Well, we didn't have good drafts, and so we had a hollowed out time, and now we have some good players with TJD. These are long-term. Pods is really good, TJD and Jonathan Kuminga, right? That's the future. And we have to rely on the veterans, but gosh, they're not getting it done, and we need the young guys to grow. And Pods in particular, I'm a fantasy basketball guy. I don't know if you've noticed how good his numbers are. I bet you anything, we're going to see a lot more of Pods. He's very good, and he's going to be the option, I believe, that's going to be, coming on with the scoring option. And then one more thing about TJD, we're going to see a lot of pick and roll. He has the best pick and roll maybe since Karl Malone. I mean, the guy can pick and roll. And so that's what I want to see. I want to see TJD pick and rolls all day long. And so any thoughts on that?
Yeah, he was very effective last night when you're talking about Trayce Jackson-Davis, who finished with 11 points, one shy of a double-double. He had the 9 rebounds. But I want to say that all 11 points may have come off of the pick and roll, and I think the majority of which were all dunks for Trayce Jackson-Davis. But he's very good. Brandon Podziemski, very good. But I think to Ev's point, these are not what you would call star players as of right now. And even being very good role players for the future is going to be – Brandon Podziemski is – I think you're looking at the future leader of this basketball team, and that could be a lot sooner rather than later. This guy continues to impress, and no moment seems to be too big. But I think what you're referring to is that what the Warriors need is not – you need guys like Brandon Podziemski, certainly, and TJD, certainly. but who is going to score the basketball 18 to 23 points a contest not named Steph Curry?
And that is up for grabs on every single game. It's like some nights it could be, I think the most logical choice is probably Klay Thompson, just because he's been that guy in the past. And during their 5-game win streak right before Christmas, Klay Thompson was on a heater and they were winning, and then he couldn't find water if he fell out of a boat and they were losing. So, I think Steph also wasn't particularly great offensively, but, those two guys to me are probably their 1s and 2. Kuminga has shown an ability to be a second option offensively, but he's also up and down. I do wonder just how the impact of his relationship with Kerr affects how he's playing. And he said after the game that, all is well. I love being in Golden State. Less than, 12 hours after the article came out that he's lost faith in Steve Kerr and doesn't believe that he's going to be able to develop in Golden State under Steve Kerr. So my question moving forward is, do you buy it? Do you buy that Kuminga is all of a sudden bought in? Because I think he's bought in when he plays 35 minutes, but what if he gets another 18 against Toronto on Sunday and the Warriors lose? That noise becomes louder and the fire at Kerr's feet becomes hotter. I don't think the Warriors have necessarily solved their issues. And last night's game, I think even though they won, still highlighted a few that they have, which I'm sure we can dig into on the other side.
All right, when we continue, Steve, Steel Toe, Mark, Gerald, the rest of the callers, just stay with us. We just got to go to a break, sell a few things, and we come back. We'll continue the conversation with the Warriors and specifically Jonathan Kuminga, the X Factor once again this week as we roll along. Evan Giddings and Dan Avone on Warriors This Week. Back after this.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit porky, and you may even...
With that epic loss to Denver, follow things up with a victory against the Detroit, thus concluding the week that was. Up next, they take on the Toronto Raptors. That'll be right here, of course. You know the drill. 95.7 The Game, beginning with the pregame show. 5:30 is the tip, and then they conclude the homestand with a date against the New Orleans Pelicans as the big fella comes to town. Of course, I'm referring to one Zion Williamson. Let's get back out to the phone lines.
Oh, you don't mean James Wiseman last night?
Well, James Wiseman, actually, a couple of key blocks.
Yeah. Did you see him dunk on, I think it was Saric?
Oh, that's right.
He had an and one.
He did.
That's pretty good.
He's still, listen, we don't want to dog the guy because I think it's really important to keep perspective. Anytime you mention his name, just like that of Jonathan Kuminga or anybody else, he is so young and has still played only a limited number of basketball games, including his collegiate career with Penny Hardaway and out in Memphis. So, I mean, the jury's still out on the guy, but he still looks at times a little bit lost defensively, which was really the big knock on him. It wasn't the physical tools you could see, but it's just the rotational help, the help defense, and just sort of understanding the way the Warriors do things. He just wasn't moving quickly enough, I think, for them. Yeah, no, look, I think everyone is still rooting for James Wiseman. He did nothing off the court that would make you think he's a bad person. I think in Kerr referenced it pregame yesterday, he kind of got caught in between where the Warriors thought that they were heading and where the Warriors ended up becoming, a championship team. And so, unfortunately, he just the fit wasn't right. But I'm sure everyone wishes him well because he's a really good guy. And it's unfortunate that the Warriors whiffed on him, but that's just the reality. He speaks Mandarin for crying out loud. He does. That's a smart dude. Steve's hanging out in Oakland. Oakland is the location. Steve is on board. Hey, Steve.
Hey, good morning, guys. Thanks for having me again. I just wanted to comment on the progression of this team. Obviously, they're not as fundamentally sound as the teams we've had in the past that have won the championships. So, therefore, Steve Kerr has to do a little more matching and moving. He's done a better job of letting the guys make mistakes and left them in the game. But at the same time, he hasn't found the right rotation. Moody has to play more. He hasn't played at all, hardly. That's the issue because he's as good as anybody on that team when he's on the court. Steve Kerr has to do a better job rotating players in and out, obviously, and kind of frustrating watching. It's going to be a long year, but they definitely need Draymond back because he's the coach on the floor. He's the one that really kind of orchestrates a lot of the young guys that don't know where they need to be as far as spacing. So we really need him back. But unfortunately, when he comes back, Kerr's going to have an issue with the rotation again. But I think having him on back is a lot smaller issue than having guys that don't know where they need to be on the floor. And there are also too many three-pointers being taken. A lot of easy layups are being passed up to pass the three-point line, and that's a problem in the NBA. But with the Warriors, if we improve that, we can win a lot more games by playing a little more physical inside, in my opinion. Thank you. Steve, man, a lot of good calls today. Steve is, again, spot on. I'm one of those. I'm a big proponent of Draymond Green, and I think this is a better basketball team when he's on the floor, and they do miss him. They missed him against Denver. They missed him last night, especially when you have a young team. He is that sort of player coach. Ev, what do they do when he comes back, and who's going back to the bench? Is it Kuminga? Well, I actually don't think anyone right now because, according to this starting lineup, like Chris Paul was in the starting lineup. So right now I think the bigger question is who you replace Paul with in the starting lineup. It could be Podziemski. It could be Moody. Could be Wiggins. Like right now, if you're looking at the Warriors and Draymond Green coming back into the fold, I think the guy that I would think goes to the bench is probably Looney or whoever is at that five. I know sometimes it's been Trace Jackson-Davis, but to me, the Warriors right now, and what I want to see from Draymond, and I'm not in the camp of I can't wait till he gets back. Honestly, I'm kind of indifferent, Dan, just based on his actions, based on how the Warriors have played in his absence, and based on some of the progression we've seen in his absence, mainly from someone like Kuminga. I'm not necessarily excited for his return, but I also think it's necessary if the Warriors are to realize their potential or at least figure out what they have with this team. To me, the lineup that I want to see when Draymond comes back, and it's still possible, even with the injuries, is Curry, Clay, Kuminga,
Draymond, and Wiggins. I think if the Warriors are to figure out their ceiling as a playoff team, as a May through June type of team, probably less so on the June side, they need to figure out if Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga can play together. And I think Draymond Green gives them a chance to learn more about that because he's a secondary playmaker from the forward spot. He, along with Curry, have two creators on the floor at the same time. And I think with Wiggins and Kuminga, they have the most potential on the defensive end to get stops, which they haven't been able to do. If those two cannot coexist, then it really doesn't matter to me what Draymond Green brings or doesn't bring back when he returns from a suspension. That lineup to me, or that two-man combination, is what the Warriors have to figure out if it can work by the trade deadline, because if not, one of them has to go. And I don't know about you, Dan, but my choice right now, I'm leaning towards Andrew Wiggins because Kuminga has too much potential, and I think he's earned an opportunity to be not just be a part of this organization, but be a focal point of this season. So when Draymond returns to the fold, I want to see how he impacts Wiggins and Kuminga being on the floor together, because right now they haven't been good enough for me to feel confident that they can play together moving forward.
Yeah, I think two things jump out at me. You're very small, if that's the lineup, and I'm with you. That's a talented five, but I think Steve Kerr would tell you that they just haven't played well together. And you know this. And
I agree,
statistically, they haven't. And Kerr would also tell you that, yeah, you need time to develop that rapport, but time may not be something they have. That a trial by error for a team that's expected to win right now, that's where you get into this whole juggling act as a head coach. It's not Detroit. It's not Utah. It's not a rebuild in Washington, right, where you can just roll them out. Let's see how you guys play together. We're not trying to win right now. We're trying to develop for the future. The issue with Steve Kerr is you can do that to a certain degree, but at what expense? Like, while I try and get these guys on the same page, can I afford to lose more games, I think is what Steve might point out to you. All right, Back out to the phone line. San Mateo now the location. Steel Toe, where you been? Welcome aboard.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Evan. I appreciate it. Yeah, I just wanted to share my thoughts on the Warriors. I always thought it was really about Steve Kerr versus the two-point bucket. It wasn't about Kuminga. It's about Steve Kerr really against all big men that score in the paint. Ever since Kevin Durant left, Steve Kerr's offensive system dead last inside the paint scoring, dead last on the free throws. It's Steve Kerr's broken system. If Steve Kerr had Joel Embiid in his system, Joel Embiid couldn't average 12 points in Steve Kerr's system. Same thing with the Joker. If the Joker was playing Steve Kerr's system, the Joker could not even hit 10 points average. Steve Kerr's system is the broken part of this Warriors organization. That's why I think he really has to go. Thank you.
Steel Toe, thanks so much. It's a good question. Chicken or the egg. Is it the system or is it the players? Does he have players that he has to play to their strength, which is obviously shooting the three, which is why, getting back to Weissman, why missing on him was so significant. Because I think the Warriors recognize the trend in the NBA right now is that you need a big, because the big has returned to the NBA. And the Warriors are still playing basketball as though it's 2015, 2016, when they, of course, they changed the template as to how to win games. They would like to move with the times. If you look at anybody you have right now that's relevant, the big is back. Like Joel Embiid in Philadelphia, Milwaukee has got Giannis. You come out west, it's all about the land of the Giants. The Joker, you've got Karl Anthony Towns out in Minnesota, you got Chet Holmgren. Everybody has a serviceable big, a skilled big. And I think the Warriors, it's not so much Steve Kerr, or I could be wrong, that Steve Kerr is saying, no, this is the way we do it. We only stay small. We just want three ball. I think they tried to go big with James Wiseman, which would have been perfect for them to sort of combat the bigs that I just mentioned. It's that they missed on the guy, and now the cupboard's sort of empty, and this is what I have, so I can't necessarily play in the paint.
Yeah, I mean, I think the call is a little extreme that Jokic and Embiid wouldn't succeed in Kerr's system. I think that's giving Kerr too much credit, honestly, of like that he is the man that's kind of pulling the strings behind everything. I don't think Kerr's the reason behind Stephen Curry's greatness. I don't think he's the reason why Klay Thompson was a top two-way player, why Draymond Green was a transcendent defensive player. The job of the head coach is to amplify your stars. And right now the Warriors have one star. The Denver Nuggets have two, on some nights maybe three. The Milwaukee Bucks have a star in Giannis. Philadelphia's got a star in Embiid and a budding star in Maxey. Like, I'm with you. You said it. You put it perfectly in the first hour, Dan. Like, players win. You know, this is a players' league. And right now the Warriors don't have the players to match up with the big boys. Now, I think that's not an excuse for being a game below 500, but I do think that Kerr has probably lost a few games for the Warriors this year. He might have helped win a couple of games for the Warriors this year. But right now, the Warriors are in a position where they have to figure out, like, I think the most important part for me before this deadline, and I don't think we're going to see a move until February 6th or close to, is because they are still in a discovery position. Like, they still have to discover what this roster has and what they want it to be. And whether that's for this season, I think it's more, to me, kind of looking down the line. You're looking big picture at what you can project for next year, because I don't think they can win a title this season. But you also can't necessarily just, give in and give up. So, to me, from that call, I understand the frustration with Kerr, and we have gotten a lot of that on this show, on Warriors Live, Warriors Wrap Up. People have voiced frustrations with Kerr. But to me, to say that this season and the shortcomings in repeated performances in which the players themselves have taken onus, have talked about blown leads, and not being able to figure this thing out, saying that Steve Kerr is the biggest reason why they are a game below 500, to me, is giving him too much credit. Like, I don't think that he is the reason why when the Warriors were winning championships, I don't think he was the biggest reason for that. He helped that. But Curry, Klay, Dre, KD, like, that's why they won championships. Iguodala, that's why they won championships. And they're not as good now because I don't think their players are as good. Kerr can do so much, yes, but I don't think he's the sole reason.
Mark's in San Francisco as we go back out to the phone lines at 888-957-9570. Hey, Mark.
Hey, gentlemen, I think we need a scorer, a really proven scorer coming off the bench like Bogdanovic of Atlanta, somebody like that, or the one from Detroit. To me, that's what we're missing. I mean, when Wiggins is in there, you can't depend on him to get a key hoop. I mean, the reason we lost to Denver is nobody could bury a bucket. When we had an 18-point lead, we could have finished them off, and even our veterans couldn't make that big shot. I think we need another scorer coming off the bench.
Well, it's not off the bench.
Yeah,
Thanks so much. How about
starting lineup?
Yeah. Anybody who can score at this juncture for the Golden State Warriors. And once again, it's just sort of, who offsets the scoring from Steph Curry. And if Steph Curry is not having a good night, well, then it just becomes that much more problematic.
Like, that's what stood out to me watching the first half against the Pistons, and it was a sleepy first half. Like, their top scorer was Dario Saric. Like, that's...
Who, by the way, doesn't get enough love.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I think he does. Maybe you and I differ on him, and we can get into that. I think Saric is a player that looks really good on a team that lacks scoring because he can score. Like, Saric is a player that, to me, gives up on the defensive end as much as he makes up for on the offensive side.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I don't think he's bad. Look, he's shooting 39% from three-point range, a little bit under 50 from the floor, 10 points a game, 6 rebounds. But if Saric is, your primary or secondary scorer for an extended period of time, I just think you're in trouble. So, and excuse me, to the caller's point, I think that is kind of a larger issue with the Warriors. It's not like they have scoring off the bench. I think they're the second unit as far as scoring goes in the NBA. Like, they outscore teams on the bench. The starters haven't been able to get it done with consistency. And that's why I think we've also seen 11, and now it will be because of Chris Paul's absence, 12 different starting lineup combinations through the first 35 games. Like, Kerr's trying to mix and match guys, and I don't think he's found the right combinations yet. But to me, a scoring answer off the bench is not what the Warriors need. And in fact, a problem that I do have with the way the roster is formed right now is there's probably a lot of players outside Curry, maybe Clay, Kuminga. There's a lot of players that on Denver, like if you just look 1 through 5, Curry's starting over Jamal Murray. Is Clay starting over KCP or Michael Porter Jr.?
There's no one in that lineup that's crack. There's no one that's cracking that Denver lineup.
That's what I'm saying. Like, those guys would be great secondary unit options for a championship team. Right now, they need those players to either play better or you got to figure something out.
Gerald's in San Francisco, California. He's our next caller. Gerald, how are you?
Man, I'm great. How are you?
Well, thank you.
Fantastic.
Great. A couple things. First of all, if the big three need another $40 million player, then at least 2 of those big three need to consider themselves as role players. When I look at this season, it is clearly because you have Draymond losing his top and not playing and getting kicked out of games and getting stupid penalties that change the momentum in games. And it's Curry and Clay. Every time something gets rolling, they're like, oh, I'm hot. And then they start jacking up contested threes when the ball should be moving. And they do that all the time to break momentum. And then last but not least, we got a bit unlucky. We rolled the dice on some Fugazi dudes. Poole was Fugazi, love him, but he was Fugazi. And so is Andrew Wiggins. That's why the fan base loves JK so hard, because he shows up every day with passion. You ain't got to put a battery in his back. He ready to go every night. And so that's why the fans see it, so that's why they pushing him. And he's our own. We drafted him. So if the Warriors got to attach a first-round pick to get this dude out, great. We got a championship out of him. No need to try and keep whooping a dog that don't want to fight. He don't want to do it, so why are we pressing him?
Good job, Joe. He did touch on something that I wanted to expand on. And he's right, I believe, that when Clay and Steph hit a couple of threes and they feel as though they got it going, they become a little bit selfish. They feel as though it's time to heat check, and they have that latitude. You can see that Steve Kerr's like, you guys, you're not Jonathan Kuminga, you're not Moses Moody. You have a leash to do whatever it is that you want because you're such good players. And if you feel as though you're beginning to, you're on one and you're making some threes, I'll let you go ahead and play it out. And they do it at the expense of moving the basketball, and they do it at the expense of what is contextually should involve other players, of what the game or the flow dictates, that they get in their own head that, hey, listen, I once scored 37 and a quarter. I'm having one of those nights. I know there's 2 guys on me. I know I'm fading to my left. I know I'm off balance, but I'm shooting this 3 because that's who I am. That's my brand, and they get away with it. And I do think it becomes at the expense of Warrior possessions, and it also, and I talked about this specifically, if someone was to ask me what happened with the Golden State Warriors, and there's a multitude of things that you can point at in that loss to Denver down the stretch in squandering an 18-point lead, but first and foremost to me, it was Steph Curry. And it was not only the turnover in their last possession, but it was the poor decision and the lack of shot making and the ill-advised shots early in the clock. But a lot of that is to what the caller just pointed out, that they have this liberty to go ahead and okay, you're on one, go ahead and do you, as opposed to running Warrior basketball. And what that leads to is runouts, easy transitional baskets for Denver, which is exactly what the doctor ordered. If you want to let another team back into a basketball game, shoot ill-advised long threes early in the clock that lead to runouts the other way and layups on the other end. That will bring another team back into the game. Not only will it allow them to cut into your lead, but it allows you to cut into the lead quickly. And I think that the Warriors become susceptible to that in living with that 3 ball as though it's still 2015, 2016, and I'm still Steph Curry or Klay Thompson of yesteryear in my mid to late 20s. And sometimes that can be really, really problematic for the Golden State Warriors. And I don't know how you move off on that. Again, because to a certain degree, they've sort of, they've almost gotten to a point where Steve Kerr is like, I owe this to you. I don't know how you curb that, but as a head coach, I do know that you need to rein that in a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of good points made by the caller there, and there's a lot to unpack. When it comes to Stephen Curry, I think that's someone that everyone is okay with being selfish, but that's something that you live and die with. And you're okay with living and dying with Stephen Curry being selfish because he's still playing at an all-time level. But you're right. When you combine, they're not turnovers, but they are kind of live ball leakouts when you're taking quick shots that lead to long rebounds and you're not getting back in transition. But even when you're loose with the ball, like a big reason why Detroit was in that basketball game is the Warriors weren't shooting well. They turned the ball over 19 times.
19 turnovers.
It led to 28 points. Like that's why Detroit's in that basketball game, including down the stretch. That's how they cut into an 11-point lead with 7 minutes left. And that's not a team that should have any semblance of hope against a team like, the Warriors when they're playing at their potential. So, and the Denver game, look, as much as I do think Steph rushed a lot, I also think that he, at times, feels like he has to. Because, for example, the game before against Orlando, I thought Curry in the first half took a lot of quick shots early in shot clocks. And Orlando is a long, lengthy, very good defensive group. They're second in the NBA as far as per 100 possessions. Curry was taking quick shots because he had to get them off. But once they started falling, then you get into a rhythm, and then you do want Curry to keep shooting because you don't know who else is going to be able to catch fire. So when Curry scores his 36 and he gives you, 13 in the fourth quarter and he's taking advantage of mismatches in crunch time, well, then it's all good. The more interesting case study to me is Klay Thompson because he is someone that can shoot you out of basketball games, but he's also someone that I think because there's a lack of scoring around the rest of the roster kind of has to be the pseudo second option on most nights. And when he doesn't have it going, well, then I want to see what he did against Detroit, which is at least provide some semblance of a defensive presence, be able to stay in front of a guy if you can, like Cade Cunningham. And he can't do that every single night because there are quick guards that are better players, and he's past his prime. So for me, the selfishness, I don't have an issue with when it comes to Curry. The selfishness around the rest of the roster, I don't think is I want to go get mine, I want to prove something, but it's looking around and saying, gosh, we don't have anyone else right now besides 30 that can do anything. Let me try and help. And that, to your point, is not Golden State Warriors basketball.
Well, I would just say specifically that Denver game that I think they built the majority of that significant lead without Steph Curry. I think it was a lot of Pajemski. It was sort of that collective effort, and then all of a sudden it became Steph-centric, and that's when they squandered a lot of it. All right, Austin, as well as Antoine, hang on. We got to get to a break. We continue. We'll take your phone calls. It's Evan Giddings. It's Dan Devone. It's Warriors This Week. We roll along with much, much more right after this.
Boy, am I glad to be done with my holiday shopping.
Oh, I know.
And now I just want to relax.
Me too. Well, except there's one more store we should check out.
Ugh, no way.
Because this week, we can get a Samsung, LG, or Sony TV.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Someone on the 707 Comcast text line saying, hello, Kuminga is the second scorer option. And we can discuss that. Is Kuminga potentially, can he rear his head to being the number 2
which
to
night?
Steph Curry?
Yeah, which night? I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I like JK's growth as far as his passing is concerned. Like, I think, I mean, you'd like to see him, attack certain matchups and I guess, be more offensive minded sometimes, but I think his feel for the game is what's impressed me the most about him this year. And he's still not, all the way there. He's got room to grow, but his feel, I think, has been much improved. Like, he looks a lot more comfortable. Like, the game is slowing down for him,
doubt.
and that's a great sign at age 21.
Yeah, and he's making extra passes, and he's seeing the floor. You can see the growth, but there's still a way to go.
Yeah.
All right, welcome back to Warriors This Week. Alongside Evan Giddings, it's Dan Devone. We're talking about the Warriors. We're talking about Jonathan Kuminga. Warriors coming off that win against Detroit. Up next, they take on Toronto right here on 95.7 The Game, beginning with a tip at 5:30. Pregame show. What time are you going on with the pregame?
Granny should have the pregame at 4:30. Yeah, 4:30 will be Warriors Live, and then I'll have Warriors wrap up after.
There we go. Phone lines, 888-957-9570. You know the drill, 888-957-9570. We're backing up once again, this time, for the first time today, off to San Jose, and Austin joins us. What's up, Austin?
Hey, fellas. Happy Saturday, Dan. And Evan, good to talk to you guys. Listen, a couple thoughts. First of all, Evan, I will say that there's no excuses for Steve Kerr. He's been fortunate to win 4 titles. We all appreciate that, but at the same time, you don't get to just revel in success. You have to take your responsibility for when things don't go well too. So he's getting paid a lot of money to manage that team. So if it isn't happening, I'm going straight at him. Number one. Number two, Jonathan Kuminga. I think Jonathan Kuminga had been put through a lot with the Warriors. First of all, when they drafted Weissman, he was blasted after that, but he was forced to listen and sit back and watch them try to coddle Weissman unsuccessfully into a success story, which he never was going to be. And so he had to sit through that. I don't think that when people were sort of associating them the same as being the same talent level and needing the same development, which was never the case. Weissman was never going to develop the same way that Jonathan Kuminga has. So I think that was a misstep on the Warriors. The third thing I wanted to say was, why are we nitpicking Jonathan Kuminga's shortfalls? I mean, Steph and Clay were allowed to develop through their problems, and neither one of them are perfect players either. I mean, Steph still can't pass the ball very well, yet he is a great shooter. So why don't we just accept what Jonathan is good at and stop nitpicking what he's not good at? The final thing, guys, is draft trade deadline. I'm interested in adding someone like, maybe it's a thought, kind of a guy that's off the radar, somebody that's not as talented, maybe not working well with their team. Someone like Ivy or DeJounte Murray, who's a really good on-ball defender. That's the kind of guys they got to go out and get. Somebody that's a little bit disgruntled with their current team, but has a lot of talent. What do you guys think? Thanks. I'll keep listening.
Appreciate that, Austin. No, so the Kerr thing, look, his feet are going to get held to the fire no matter what. That's just a fact. And look, he doesn't have a contract for next year. If anything, that should tell you the kind of confidence right now that the Warriors have in him right now. Like, he's in a contract here. He doesn't have one. So it's not about defending Kerr or not defending Kerr. I don't think I necessarily am, but I am trying to, I guess, approach this with a realistic sense that, like, this team is not great as currently constructed. And I guess I just don't know how much Kerr is supposed to do with that. I know you point at the head coach when things go wrong, but I guess I prefer to point at the players when things go wrong. So that's number one. DeJounte Murray is interesting. He's someone that has got a lot of money coming up, and he's going to be owed $115 million over the next 4 years. So I think that the Hawks would love to move off of DeJounte Murray because he's not a part of their future. I'm not sure how much he helps the Warriors, and I also don't know how much the Warriors in general, like, I think DeJounte Murray is a fine player. I think Jaden Ivey could develop into a fine player, but I don't know how many more guards the Warriors want on this team or how many more small players they want. Like, Dan, I'll throw this back to you. If you're looking at needs for this Warriors team right now, where would you start?
Star. it's got to be someone to the Markkanen or it's the Pascal Siakam level. You don't need you don't need to move players in the proverbial sort of shifting the deck chairs on the Titanic here. This is either you get better, or if you want to make lateral moves, you're just wasting everybody's time. You're just moving salaries. So if this is about, you talked about this, Evan, you laid this out. You're at the crossroads of this basketball team, right? It's either a commitment to the youth, or you're going to stay status quo with the Steph Draymonds and the Chris Pauls of the world. And so if you're going to make a trade, it's got to be impactful. This is going to be considered a significant trade, because in order to get that quality basketball player, you're going to have to give up Jonathan Kuminga. I'll put it out there, because you cannot, GMs aren't stupid and they're going to hang up on you unless you mention Jonathan Kuminga being part of a trade piece. That's the only way you're going to bring value back. Now, a lot of people, I'm not saying do it, I'm just saying that that's the trade they have to make. It's to go get a star player so that you can win right now, and so that it unlocks, and all of a sudden now you have an identity, and this makes sense. You have a star player to go along with another star player in Steph Curry, and then you have these youngsters that you can mix in. As of right now, it's sort of amorphous, right? And we've discussed this. But I think if you're going to make that deal, it's going to be one that's going to bring back a star, and you're going to give up a boatload, including not only stars, well, the Warriors, I use that term liberally, but you're going to be giving up draft picks and significant players that are currently on the Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, I think the most valuable asset the Warriors have is their draft capital, because they don't have a pick this year, but 2026, 2028, they can trade their first-round picks. And if I'm a team looking at the Warriors, with the way this season is trending, with the direction of their stars, which are getting older, I want every first-round pick the Warriors got right now, because I don't know what they're going to be. Like, they might be a lottery team in 4 years. So that 2028 pick might be really, really good. It's also a reason why, if I'm the Warriors, I don't want to move off of any of my draft picks, because I don't know where this thing is going to go, especially if Curry doesn't continue to play at an all-time level, which, based on history, beyond age 35, he's probably going to decline a little bit. And we've, I think, seen even glimpses of that throughout this season. So I think the Warriors are also in a tough place from a trade perspective, because I don't know about you, Dan, but I don't want to give up Jonathan Kuminga. I don't. And when you don't want to give up your most valuable young player, and I would be less inclined to give up valuable draft capital, well, then it's very hard for me to envision a star coming back in that trade. So to me, I don't, and I also don't think there's really a star out there. Like, the best player on the market that's been thrown out is probably Pascal Siakam, maybe Lauri Markkanen. But neither of those players to me are game changers from the standpoint they're going to put you into title contention with what the Warriors currently have. And we don't even know how they'd fit. So I think they're good players. But to me, the more realistic way for the Warriors to approach this is, and I wonder how much the Chris Paul injury affects it. And we've talked about this before. To me, Chris Paul is the most likely piece to be moved, because he's an expiring deal, makes about $30 million, could bring back a decent piece or maybe a couple of players, although I don't think they need even more players. And he is not someone I think the Warriors envisioned having on the roster long-term when they acquired him. So if you're going to package Paul and Kuminga and a pick, I think that's probably your best price to go out and get and fetch something big. But I wouldn't want to do that. To me, like, if I'm looking at players that can kind of help you around the margins, I do think it needs to be a wing. I don't think that the Warriors are dissuaded from playing small ball if there's the right guy out there. But it's got to be someone that can either score from the wing, can provide some defensive impact. And so Siakam does check those boxes. I just think that he's too expensive for me to give up what the Raptors would want, in addition to not knowing if Siakam's going to be back next year, because he's a free agent, has already stated he's going to test free agency. He's probably going to want a pay upgrade and is going to be making $40-ish million beyond next season, and that'd be too much for me to commit to. I think, Bojan Bogdanovic, a guy we saw last night for the Pistons, is someone that's attainable for the Warriors. He's a little bit older, but he wouldn't be around for all that long. He's making $19 million next season. He's pretty affordable. And then maybe a 3-and-D player like, Dorian Finney-Smith for the Nets has been rumored to be in trade talks. I know he's not a sexy name, but he shoots 40% from three. He's going to be making $15 million for the next 2 years, including a player option in 2026. So, there are guys that I think you can go out and get. I just don't know if there's a star out there for the Warriors that's attainable for what people would be asking for.
If you're going to go get players that you just mentioned, whether it's Bogdanovich, then to me, just keep what you have, because these are just lateral moves. It's not really impacting winning one way or the other, because you have those sort of players. Maybe they're a step above, but it's the same. You have that sort of personnel on your team currently. I think if you're going to make a move, this gets back to what it is that you were talking about. You have to make a commitment either to the youth, or you're going to say we're going to stay and try and win a championship right now with Steph and company. This is going to be a significant. Yeah, it's a bit liberal of me to say Pascal Siakam is a star. That's a bit of a reach, but he's an upgrade from just about everybody else that not only you mentioned, but I think that are available in potential trades. Now, obviously, Toronto says he's on the trade block. What do you have? And I don't even know if the Warriors have enough assets, quite frankly, to turn the head of that at Toronto. Chris Paul it now becomes a really interesting component, because if he's a trade piece, there's a good chance that he's on the shelf come February 5th. So,
yeah.
How much value you're going to get back for a guy who's going to be on IR is the big question going forward. Let's get back out to the phone lines, Ev. Oakland, California. Antoine wants to get in on the conversation. Antoine, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Dan, Evan, really enjoyed the show. I think my frustration is really with Steph and Clay and Steve Kerr's handling, because I think one of the callers from San Francisco mentioned it earlier, is that, those two guys cross the half court and then, take the first shot, right? The ball has stopped moving, and historically speaking with the Warriors, we play the beautiful basketball, ball's moving, we get easy buckets. And it just seems like in the last 4 or 5 minutes of games, ball just stays with Steph or Chris Paul or whoever, and then we can't get any shots off, and we're having these massive scoring droughts. And that's where I'd like to see Kerr call the timeout and say, hey, listen, we need to move the ball. And I get it. Steph is a historic shooter, greatest of all time, but he has been in a slump. And yeah, he's had a couple 30-point games, but to me, those games are hollow because, he's not scoring in money time, and we need to move the ball. So that's my thoughts, and thanks for taking the call.
Yeah, it's a good point. I sort of kicked off the show talking about Steph Curry and why I felt that he lost that game for the Golden State Warriors against the Denver Nuggets. Now, obviously not him alone, but if I had to pick one factor, it was, the lack of taking good shots and shooting early in the clock and being double and triple teamed, quite frankly, at times. And Denver recognizing that the players on the floor, the personnel that the Golden State Warriors had, that it was only Steph because, you had basically two non-scorers at any moment on the floor in those closing moments, which is another argument to bring Jonathan Kuminga back into the fold, and certainly should have been on the floor. But I do think, and we've heard this from more than one caller, Ev, that, Steph and Clay at times want to turn back the clock, and they have the rope to do so, and think it's still 2016 and they can still be that guy. I think Klay Thompson is a completely different player when he lets the game come to him, and he's more judicious with his shots. And when that three is there, or when he has the mid-range, he's such an efficient basketball player, and you can live with some of those misses. And I would say the same holds true to a certain degree with Steph. But there are times when they want to heat check, and they feel as though, this is my world, and it becomes at the expense of what it is that the Warriors are trying to do structurally from an offensive standpoint, which really jeopardizes the team. And again, just to reiterate, and I don't want to get into coach speak, but it leads to those leak outs and those run outs and those transitional baskets the other way, which really got the Warriors, I think, pointed the direction of them squandering that lead against the Denver Nuggets. So
yeah,
it's an issue going forward. And I don't know the conversation you have with two guys that, are staples, in that dynastic run you just enjoyed.
Well, Steve Kerr and Klay Thompson did have a heart-to-heart, but I think that was more about the negative energy that Klay brings when he isn't playing well or isn't shooting well. And I think for Klay Thompson, yeah, you want to see him take better shots for sure, But the issue is, I don't know who I trust right now outside of those two to consistently make timely shots down the stretch of games. And I don't even know if I trust Klay Thompson right now, quite frankly, to consistently make timely shots. Like, Steph is the only one with the ball in his hands down the stretch of games that I'm looking at and say, okay, he can go make a play. I mean, even Kuminga, I think Kuminga's really good and he can get downhill, but whether it's because Kerr hasn't played him down the stretch of games or he hasn't been assertive. Like last night against Detroit, he closed, played 36 minutes. He didn't score in the second half. He turned the ball over a few times. So while he was productive in other areas offensively, he wasn't a guy that I was looking to necessarily take over. And the issue with Chris Paul being out, not that he's someone you throw the ball to and say, hey, go get me a basket, but I do think he makes it more difficult for me to envision that passing coming back, because you're not just missing one creator, you're also missing two, because Draymond Green can be a guy that moves the ball and keeps it in flow. Chris Paul, while the game slows down, there's less pace, does know where to go with the basketball. And actually, you're talking about decisions during the Denver game and Curry making some bad choices with his shots. I think the weird part to me watching that final possession is you went out and got Chris Paul because you wanted someone that could take care of the basketball. Why isn't he initiating the play? Like, why is Curry bringing it up the timeline and running a rub screen with Chris Paul? Shouldn't it be the other way around? Like, shouldn't you have Curry off ball? Because whether Curry gets it to Chris Paul or he makes the pass into the corner with Andrew Wiggins, I don't know if I necessarily trust those guys to make that shot with the game on the line. Maybe Paul has been there before more than Wiggins, but Curry's the one I want taking the look. And against a long, lengthy team like Denver, I think he's got a better chance of getting that look off ball. So, if there's coaching decisions that I'm struggling with, that would be one of them. If you're going to have Chris Paul in the game, shouldn't he be the guy controlling the play? That's what he does best. And now you don't have that anymore. So who's going to fill that void? To me, and you got a glimpse of it last night, but I think we are going to see some more Corey Joseph because Steve Kerr trusts him at the point. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I would like to see more Pajemski on ball. I would like to see him more at the one, but he's also a rookie. And does he have that ability yet? I think he needs to develop it more. And this is a great opportunity to do so. But with Chris Paul being out along with Draymond Green, the Warriors, I do think, are going to have to play or are going to be more inclined, or they're going to be, I guess, tempted more so to play hero ball because there's not as many players on the floor that move the rock like Chris and Draymond.
And I think Steve Kerr, to your point, said that Moody would play. With the absence of Chris Paul, it creates some minutes for Moody, and I know he's become a fan favorite. And also, Corey Joseph simply is getting run because it's a matter of position matchups, right? You just lost your point guard. So he's number 3 in the depth chart. So just logistically, he's going to get some run, because I know a lot of people it's like a head scratcher. Why is Joseph playing and not Moody? Well, it's different positions. Let's get back out to the phone lines. We're going off to Gotham City, New York, the location, and we welcome in Wade. Hey, Wade, how are you, buddy?
Hey, how you doing, guys? I love the show. Great insight you guys give daily. I love it.
Thanks, man.
You're welcome. One thing, Steve Kerr definitely has been very questionable with his decisions and time, and having running Kuminga and Wiggins on the court at the same time. I agree Moody should get those runs, those reps and more minutes, at least 5 per game, onto the court as a defender and a floor spacer. Just with more reps, you never know what potential will shine, because he has shown he did crack the playoff rotation last year. Kuminga is here. He is ready. I don't agree with Kerr not running him out there against Denver, with him having 16 points in 19 minutes with 4 assists or 4 rebounds, and being the main reason why Jamal Murray could not stay in the game in the second half. And had him ride the bench. Having Klay Thompson guard Jamal Murray, along with Wiggins in the second half. I agreed with him chasing over the screens, but he couldn't do anything offensively. He did not match what we needed at that time in the game. Kuminga's a step faster. He gets out on the floor. He had the same amount of free throw attempts as the rest of the starters in that game in 19 minutes. So that right there was a negative for me, just with the trust factor. Steve Kerr mentioned trusting the vets and giving them their due. I agree with Curry running the ball, but having it in his hands, because they struggle with him being blitzed. They haven't figured out an answer for when teams decide to double team him high when he crosses half court. And that is another thing I feel like can be tightened up with Kuminga being on the court when Draymond comes back, also with having a lob threat in TJD and having Kuminga cutting back door. Kuminga isn't a great shot, but he does have a good sense of get downhill to the rim or shoot the shot if needed. Klay Thompson also, he should stick to that also, getting down shot, hitting those pull-up middies because that works also.
A lot of stuff. Good job, Wade. I think he makes a good point when you're talking about blitzing Steph. And we talked about this off the top. It's just a lack of personnel. You have the affordability as an opposing team to do that because, go prove it to me, Golden State Warriors. Who else is going to score the basketball? In the closing minutes, we know we can take the ball out of Steph's hands. You guys have yet to prove that there's somebody, again, personnel-wise, that can score consistently. Jonathan Kuminga, I think it's an interesting X factor as to whether or not he can be that guy. And I'll put it to you, can he take steps where he can become that solid number 2? And again, this gets back to Steve Kerr, and I'm probably the last guy in the room that's going to go after the head coach, and especially when it's Steve Kerr. I'm just a big fan. I'll get out in front of that right off the top. But I do think in this instance, not only should he have played in the final 18 moments, but I think that because of the situationally, it just screamed for Jonathan Kuminga because you needed someone else who can score the basketball. And he clearly, at least in that game against Denver, had proven that he was your second best option. But just generally speaking going forward, how confident are you saying, okay, I need you to be the number 2? Could he fill that role? And obviously not there yet, but if you were to look, in that crystal ball of yours a month, 2 months from now.
On given nights, yeah. I mean, the game where he got himself back into the rotation, I know it's a Portland team that's not very good, but he took over that game. He's the reason why the Warriors won that game, a few weeks back before the new year. I think on given nights, Kuminga can be your second best offensive option. I thought he was for a half against Orlando. And the one area that Kuminga really helps that I don't think any other player can, Wiggins would be the other one, but they're kind of redundant, at least for now, is Kuminga can get easy looks. Like Kuminga can get to the rim and at least have an ability to finish around the basket.
He's the one guy you could ISO on the Warriors.
Yes. Well, Wiggins can too, but I think Kuminga's in a better position.
Mentioning Wiggins in offense these days is just like, yeah, I know he can, but this year, for whatever reason, he can't.
Yeah, exactly. No, he should be able to, but he hasn't shown himself to be that guy. Kuminga is, to me, someone that could develop into that. To me, his offensive game is probably closer to Iguodala than a real, number 2. But Iguodala could also get to the cup, and he can use his athleticism to take advantage of certain players. That's, to me, the biggest reason why Kuminga should have been in the game against Denver is you couldn't buy a bucket. Well, who's someone that can at least put pressure on the rim, get to the free throw line, maybe get a layup? Because at that point, you're talking about one basket. One basket wins you that basketball game. In large part. It doesn't have to get down to the final half-court heave from Jokic. You get a bucket, you play the free throw game, you win. Outside of Curry, I don't think there's anybody else that can attack the rim and generate a consistently good look outside of Kuminga. That's, to me, what the egregious mistake is. You needed one basket, and the only guy that could get to the rim against Denver throughout that game was J.K. So that's why I think he could develop into a nice second option because he's one of the few people that can actually use his strength and athleticism to attack the 10. But I still haven't seen it consistently enough for me to say, yeah, he does that every night.
All right, we got to get to a break. My man, D, I see you. Do not move. I want to hear from you. D's going to be on the other side. The rest of the callers, hang in there. It's Evan Giddings. It's Dan Devone. It's Warriors This Week. We'll be back after this quick commercial timeout.
Your floor is the unsung hero of your home. What other part of your house gets walked over, jumped on, scraped up, spilled on, and used as much? That's where LifeProof's luxury vinyl plank flooring comes in. Our premium flooring is durable, scratch-resistant, 100% waterproof, and antimicrobial, so it can take everything life throws at it. Plus, it comes in a variety of colors with a realistic wood texture and is easy to install. Make sure your floor can stand up to life's toughest tests with LifeProof. The Home Depot. How doers get more done.
My little brother's friends have been camped out at our place for 2 days straight. 3. It's because of the Xfinity 10G network. Internet that can handle a house full of screens at once, with basically no interruptions. And it's only getting faster. When I was their age, internet like this was a pipe dream.
You sound like my grandpa.
Please go home.
The next generation 10G network only from Xfinity. The future starts now. Now through March 21st, new customers can get 1.2 gigabit internet on the Xfinity 10G network for just $25 a month for 2 years with no annual contract and Wi-Fi equipment included when you add Xfinity Mobile with unlimited data at regular rates. Go to Xfinity.com/10G, call 1-800-XFINITY, or visit a store today. Requires paperless bill and auto-pay with stored bank account. Restrictions apply. Taxes and fees extra. Xfinity Mobile requires Xfinity Internet. After promo, regular rates apply to internet service and Wi-Fi equipment. Actual speeds vary.
I bet you folks are glad to be done with your shopping. Hopefully, all your gifts went well. But there's one last store to visit, this time just for yourself. Your chance to get one of the top-rated Samsung, LG, or Sony TVs at a crazy low price. Where? At Video Only's year-end clearance sale. A great way to end the year. If you don't check out these deals at Video Only, you'll be sorry.
As a mom, comforting my family is what I do best. Vicks Vapor Stick provides soothing, non-medicated Vicks vapors in an easy-to-apply stick. And it dries fast, so there's no mess. I use it to comfort myself and my family.
Thanks, Mom.
Vicks Vapo Stick. Soothing comfort for the whole family. And when you need more comfort for yourself, try Vicks Vapo Shower for steamy Vicks Vapors. Use as directed. Vapo Stick for use ages 4 and up. Vapo Shower use for adults only.
Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan.
Hey guys, did you know there's a generic form of Viagra that works just the same, but is 95% cheaper? And you can get it online? Go to hims.com/joy. Through Hims, you'll get a free medical consultation, discreet shipping if prescribed, and the process is 100% online. To start your free online visit, go to hims.com/joy. That's HIMS.com/JOY.
Does your heart long to wander? To discover the deep secrets of coral reefs? Explore the wonders of the California coast and island hop from the Galapagos to Madagascar. Feed your wild heart. Travel the world. Right here in San Francisco at the California Academy of Sciences. Get tickets at calacademy.org. 'Tis the season for science with falling snow, festive fun, and more.
Tune into 95.7 The Game for Warriors Live, 60 minutes before tip of every Warriors game throughout the season as we get you ready for the action. Brought to you by Xfinity, the Xfinity 10G network. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Can the red and gold finally break through and win the Super Bowl? Do the Warriors have one last run in them? Nobody keeps you locked in on Bay Area sports better than 95.7 The Game. Download the free Odyssey app so you're never locked out. Every single show and every single Warriors game, all free and available at your fingertips whenever you want them on the Odyssey app. That's AUDACY. Download it right now.
Do you have 3 ex-wives and your current trophy wife wants a life insurance policy 3 times the size of the policies you had to purchase for your previous mistakes? If so, you need to call Big Lou at Term Provider, 800-700-6898. Big Lou is intimately familiar with your problems, and if you're 50 or 60 years old and in reasonably good health, a $1 million policy should only cost about $100 to $200 per month. Big Lou may have a solution for your previous policies as well. You may even save enough money to lighten the load on your new $1 million policy. Remember, call Big Lou. He's like you, except he's only on number 2. Call Term Provider at 800-700-6898. That's 800-700-6898. For $1 million in term life insurance that you can live with. Call Big Lou at 800-700-6898. 800-700-6898.
It's a mystery where Old Spice finds its amazing scents like Himalayan sea salt, but I'm thrilled they have because no other body wash exfoliates and moisturizes 24/7 like Old Spice Gentleman's Himalayan Sea Salt Body Wash. Now, if only there was a mountain range separating the Indian subcontinent from the Tibetan plateau where I could hide my Old Spice and keep my family from stealing it, my impossibly smooth skin will finally be safe.
Don't miss out on limited-time appliance deals during the closeout event at Lowe's. Get up to 35% off select major appliances. Plus, save an extra $100 when you spend $999 or more on all major appliances. Hurry, these deals are too good to last long. Shop in-store or online today because Lowe's knows home improvement. Valid 1/4 through 1/24. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for details.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
It's Evan Giddings. It's Dan Avone. Welcome to the final hour of Warriors This Week, and what a week it has been. It seems as though it's been this sort of way the entire campaign for the Golden State Warriors, which has been turbulent. It's been ebb, it's been flow, it's been up and down, and this week was no exception as Golden State, after that heartbreaking loss at the hands of Jokic, a buzzer beater by the 7-footer, as they squandered an 18-point lead, and then they conclude things with a victory, not all that impressive, but a victory nevertheless over the Detroit Pistons, and things continue tomorrow when they take on the Toronto Raptors here once again on 95.7 The Game with the tip at 5:30. Want to dive into Jonathan Kuminga, as we have predominantly throughout the majority of today's show, but specifically getting into what it is that he said in his conversation with Shams Charania of The Athletic, as he intimated once again going after Steve Kerr and his playing time, and this one as a result of what happened against the Denver Nuggets, in which he sat in the final 18 minutes. We'll do that, but first I want to get back out to the phone lines at 888-957-9570, and it's my man. It would not be Warriors This Week without hearing from my boy D in Washington. D, what's up, man?
What's going on, Devon? What's going on, Evan?
My man.
Look here, man. You guys are my sport therapy on Saturdays and Sundays. I tell you, my days would not be good without listening to you guys.
I appreciate that.
Now, listen, I just want to make a correction to something that was said earlier. A couple of callers have mentioned that Kerr is a reactionary coach. In my opinion, there's nothing reactionary about Kerr. Kerr is ADD, attention deficit disorder. Because if Kerr was a reactionary coach, he would have known that when a player is on a heater, you don't pull him off the floor. You let him roll. You let him continue until he's tired. If Kerr was a reactionary coach, he would have known that, listen, there are certain defenders that need to be on the floor at a certain time to stop certain players from scoring the ball. Instead, he rather rolls his usual 3 guards or 4 point guards at the same time on the floor, just to continue a game, which is ridiculous in my opinion. No, there's nothing reactionary about Kerr. Kerr needs a better assistant. If we're going to continue to retain Kerr as a coach, he needs to revamp his staff, because I don't understand how you're going to have 7 other coaches next to you, for them not to be able to pull you to the side and say, look, man, we need to have J.K. on the floor. Look, man, we need to have Moody on the floor. Look, we have too many guards on the floor at the same time. Too many 6'2", 6'3" guards on the floor at the same time. Again, Kerr is not a reactionary coach. He is ADD, all right? Just label it what it is. I listen to you guys on the other side, man. That's all I got.
I think people with attention deficit disorder typically react. They just do it every 3 seconds. No, I appreciate the call. And look, I hear you that the inconsistency of Kerr throughout this season is something that is like troublesome if you're thinking about what to do with your head coach beyond this year, right? He doesn't have a contract. You do have a natural out. And to his point about assistants, I don't know Kenny Atkinson that well, but I do know that Kerr in the past has had really reliable bench coaches. You go back to the strength in numbers days, Ron Adams, a defensive guru. I know he's still on the team, but kind of more in a consultant role. Luke Walton was a pretty good bench coach for them. And obviously Mike Brown, who's now doing fantastic things in Sacramento, is probably the poster boy for the number 2 in command that's helped Kerr a lot. So, but again, if we're talking about coaching staffs, to me, that is secondary to the team. I'm not saying coaching isn't important, but I'll reiterate what you said off the rip, Dan. It's a players' league. And I just don't know how much the coaching staff, and I don't think Kerr's done a great job this season, but I don't know how much he's supposed to supplement either the fall off or the inconsistent play or production on a given night. Has he made wrong choices? Yes. He should have played Kuminga down the stretch of the game against Denver. That's obvious. But what is he doing now to try and right that wrong? And why I say reactionary is, well, quite literally during the game against Detroit, there were Moody chants coming down from the stands. A few minutes later, Moody got into the game. That seems pretty reactionary to me, even though I don't think it was planned that way. Jonathan Kuminga comes out the morning after the Denver game. His camp is saying he's lost faith in Steve Kerr. That same night, he plays a game-high 36 minutes. That's the second most minutes he's ever played in his career. That, to me, seems reactionary. I don't know if it is, in a literal sense that Kerr is reacting to these things, but that's how it appears. And that's why I'm presenting it that way. So, I think to me, the relationship between Kerr and his younger players is more important than, I guess, who he's throwing out on a given night, because even though Kuminga said after the game against the Pistons that all is well, he loves being in Golden State, his relationship with Kerr is fine, I'm still waiting to see on that, because if he doesn't get run down the stretch of a basketball game against the Toronto Raptors on Sunday, or they get blown out against the Pelicans and he doesn't play, there's evidence that suggests that his camp or him or whoever is going to voice his displeasure with it, because there's been a building track record of times in which Kuminga has been understandably frustrated with his role. Moses Moody, according to Jason Dumas, who works with us and you work with, is frustrated with his role. Like, that to me is what the bridge that Kerr's kind of got to figure out right now.
And you can't blame the players, understandably. Yeah. I'd be pissed as well if I'm Jonathan Kuminga. The one thing you can't do as a young player is, once again, and he made this mistake a couple of weeks back with Marcus Thompson, once again of the Athletic, in going to Charnia and voicing your displeasure with the head coach. I think Steve Kerr made it abundantly clear to everybody that, listen, I have an open door policy. I'm probably the most relatable coach in the NBA, and probably, the easiest to reach. And if you have anything you want to vent, I'm here for you, but it's got to stay in-house, because that's how you can break up a team. And that's how, a locker room, the last thing you want to deal with when you're trying to win basketball games, as any other player not named Jonathan Kuminga or a coach not named Steve Kerr having to answer questions about your young guard or your young forward. That's the last thing they want to deal with. You don't air your dirty laundry. It's sort of basketball and professional sports 101 that we keep things in-house. And I just think I attribute a lot of that to the fact that he's a young man and a young basketball player. And as much as he's learning, as we've detailed on the court for the game slowing down, making extra passes, I think off the court, he's also, there's a learning curve of how to deal with these things and how to channel your frustration. I don't think anybody, including Steph Curry, said as much in his post-game comments that not only do I understand it, but he essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, said that Jonathan Kuminga was right, but there's a way to handle things. And Steve Kerr intimated, as a player in his 15 years, there wasn't a game where he didn't feel as though he deserved more run. So he understands it on just about every level, but it's how you handle it is where Jonathan Kuminga is at. I think the idea of, let's just, putting Steve Kerr on a hot seat, I know that as fans, that's where we want to go. We want to point a finger. Your team loses, especially a team that is associated with winning titles, that this isn't acceptable. So where do I direct that ire? Well, it's the head coach. And things get amplified when you screw up like Steve Kerr has. And I think that it's been blatant for everybody to see that Moody should have stayed in the game against Sacramento and that Jonathan Kuminga should have closed things out against Denver. But if you're going to tell me that another coach is going to give you a better chance of winning this year, or if there's another coach that's going to change the one-loss record of the Golden State Warriors, I would argue with you. I think that when you measure coaches, especially when it comes to the NBA, the first thing you have to take into consideration is, do they, A, have the respect of the player, which is difficult to do, especially in the NBA and especially in 2023. And secondly, and as important, are you relatable with today's players? And I think Steve Kerr checks the boxes on both of those. Games aren't won with the swinging gate. This isn't Hoosiers. You don't schematically sit there and drop X's and O's and you do it better than other teams. You're not Kyle Shanahan with an innovative offense. It's not the NFL. It's a players' league, and the players will win you games if you have the right players. Now, the rotation obviously can be a question at times, but the players have to feel as though they're respected, and the players have to want to be in the proper frame of mind to want to play for you. And again, Steve Kerr is the best coach, or at least one of the elite coaches, as far as having that relatability with today's younger players. So the idea of firing him and moving him, talk about reactionary, that to me, Ev, is fans overreacting on what has been a difficult season to date.
Well, and if you want him gone, you might not have to wait very long. I mean, again, he doesn't have a deal for next season. So I think from that perspective, Kerr's been on the proverbial hot seat since the beginning of the year. Like, anytime you're coaching, quote unquote, for your job, you are auditioning. You are in a tryout season. And it sounds weird to think that a four-time head coach or four-time champion head coach is going to have to try out, but that's the reality. And I don't know if he's going to be back next year. I don't know if he wants to be back next year,
that's a good
frankly.
Point.
So, there could be some silver lining there for fans that want him on his way out. This is what I'll say when it comes to Kuminga. I think Kuminga's a good young guy, like as a man. Like, every time I listen to Kuminga talk or have had the chance to interact with him post game, just through the press conferences, thank you. He's very thoughtful. He's very respectful. He seems like a humble guy. He seems like a very different person than the one that you read about in those stories, like the one that came out yesterday from The Athletic. And to me, the bigger point that Kerr, and more so Curry, was trying to get across, it sounds like, because both of them talked about, the conversations are private. Like, you're not going to know what they say to each other. But the tone of the conversation was, hey, JK, quit letting people speak for you. Like, quit letting your camp go to Shams Charania or Anthony Slater. Quit letting the people around you tell the world how you feel. Because every time he steps to the mic, I don't get that vibe from him. I don't get that feeling from Kuminga that he is pissed off and that he is disgruntled all the time and that he is demanding minutes. I'm sure he's frustrated like any other player is. And we heard him talk to Marcus Thompson about wanting to impact games more. But I don't think he's the kind of guy that's going to try to light the building on fire if he doesn't get his way. Like, he doesn't seem like a guy who takes the basketball and goes home when he's pissed off. He seems like the guy that wants to work harder. And so I think we're getting a very different image of what Kuminga is publicly because of his representation. And that, to me, was the message that Kerr and Curry were trying to get across, which is, hey, if we deal with this in-house, I know you're mad. You should be mad. You should want to play more. But there's a perception out there, if your camp leaks things that you don't necessarily feel that are going to impact how we have to deal with distractions as a group, and that's going to hurt the team. That doesn't mean Kuminga's a bad person, and I don't think he is. But when you hear the conflicting message from the morning yesterday to the game after, the post-game after, it just doesn't match up for me. And I'm more inclined to believe that Kuminga's the guy who's on the podium after the game or speaking to reporters in the locker room after the game saying that I am trying to do my best. I am trying to fit in, and I want to help this team win, as opposed to some guy who's saying, I've lost complete faith in my head coach, and I don't think this is going to work out.
Good point. Because I think a lot of this is generated from the camp. And I think when you think about the camp, you're talking about agents. And what do agents want? They want the bigger contracts. Why? Because they get paid. I mean, that's the bottom line for a lot of these agents. And I do think that somebody's blowing in his ear that, hey, listen, man, we need to get up and go because you could be a star in this league. And, you know, you're not getting run here with the Golden State Warriors, and Steve Kerr's not doing you right. So, yeah, it's It's the Turtles. It's the Johnny Dramas for you Entourage fans that are chirping right now. And maybe it should be Jonathan Kuminga that can dictate his own narrative. Good insight there. Yeah, once again, just to reiterate, in case you were under a rock or living in a cave this past week, Jonathan Kuminga, and I'm paraphrasing, saying that he lost faith in Coach Steve Kerr and no longer believes Kerr will allow him to reach his full potential. Sources close to Kuminga telling The Athletic, and of course Shams Charania. Back out to the phone lines at 888-957-9570. It's Scott in Berkeley. Welcome to Warriors This Week. Hey, Scott.
How you doing, fellas? To add on to your point, for all this noise and everything else, whether it's been Kuminga or his people, the only thing I can say is, well, at least you're not playing under the Christopher Cohen era. And that's my first thought. Now, insofar as, Thursday night in the aftermath, the one thing I ended up thinking about is that, first of all, we got to get the Warrior fan has to get used to the idea that this is going to be a year where there's going to be a whole lot of 5-point wins or a whole lot of weird losses at the end. And the thing that has bothered me is that over the last year, I can think of 3 cases where the game-winning bucket has been a 3 from a big. And I don't know how much you can do about that, especially if the 3 who has been shooting the ball, because the first time I can think of is Karl Anthony Towns late last season. Then I think of the Chet Holmgren 3 that tied the game at the end of regulation. And the thing about the Chet shot, that was a beautiful jumper. I mean, to come off a curl like that and rise up the way he did, that was beautiful. And then Nico is probably, in this era of the NBA, he may be the single most devastating shot maker in the game. Because first of all, Nico is I've been telling people this for a while. It isn't that he's as spectacularly brutal, but there's a whole lot of Shaquille O'Neal in what Nico does down low. Because, guys get on his body and they can't move him. It's like a combination of Shaq and Moses Malone. But then you watch him pass, and the other thing about Nico is that if he doesn't get you with the shot, 2 years ago in the championship season, and I know a lot of people wouldn't remember this one, Denver won a game at the buzzer here where Nico whipped a cross-court pass right into Monty Morris's pocket for a 3. The guy, you can complain about the circumstances all you want. Getting beat by those kind of guys, you can't really do anything other than tip your hat. It's one of those. It's just some people back east have said they don't like the Warriors because they didn't go through the process of the painful progression. The old Pat Riley thing about how you have to lose before you can win. And you kind of look at it and kind of agree to it from how they went as quickly as they did from the lottery in 12 to the championship. And now they're kind of catching the tough part of everything. But again, I just don't worry about it that much. I suppose my bottom line is they're still better than the Lakers. So it's what it is. It's what it is at this point, and we still got to remember we still got 4 months to go with this season.
Well, you hope. You might find out by the trade deadline this season's for naught, and you'd start shipping people. Look, I think that's a point well taken. You do have to tip your cap when Chet Holmgren hits a turnaround 3. You do have to tip your cap when Jokic makes a 45-foot 3-pointer for the win. But
bank shot.
What you don't have to tip your cap for is it should have never gotten to that point in either of those games. That's, I think, the issue that most people have. So I understand. Yeah, and same thing. If it comes down to the wire and Curry hits a buzzer beater or hits a really difficult shot, like last night he put away the Pistons with a couple of daggers. Detroit, you got to tip your cap. That's Curry. But from a Warriors standpoint, you've now blown 4 separate 18-plus point leads. Those are meltdowns. Those are collapses. That's not a tip your cap situation. That's you couldn't get stops and you couldn't score. The only way that Denver came back in that game in the last 8 minutes or 6 minutes or whatever is an imperfect storm for Golden State. That's how it happened. And there are many different ways that you could plug a hole of that sinking ship. A lot of that is on Kerr. A lot of that is on Curry. A lot of that is on players on the floor that didn't step up. A lot of that is also on Denver. And that's where you tip your cap. But I'll tip my cap for the buzzer beater. I'm not going to tip my cap for the Warriors blowing an 18-point lead.
888-957-9570. Up next, it's Bay Rob. Bay, what's on your mind? Bay Rob joins us.
What's up, guys? How y'all doing this morning?
Bay, what's going on?
Good, man.
Man, I got to say this, man. We got to roll with the new. Our team is old. We know that our team is old. And this the thing. Curry is involving, meaning Curry is climbing. And everybody can't go where Curry goes. Some of the older guys, they stuck where they are. So we need this new generation to help Curry climb. That's Kuminga. That's Moody. We got to let these guys play. And another killer that we had that Curry helped develop was Jordan Poole. We gave away a 20-point guy a game over a situation. And he needs these guys to help him climb. And the guys that we got now, the older guys, Clay had the injuries. So Clay can't really do what he's supposed to do. Draymond, a head case. So we need this younger generation if we plan on winning, dude. Like, we can't win with these older guys. We got to get out this politics stuff. This politics stuff is killing us with these older guys, and it's costing us. It's costing us big time.
Good job, Bay. I think he's spot on. Sounds a lot like Filmo, but thanks, Bay. It's just, I think Steve Kerr, we're witnessing.
Rob, he's the man.
Is it two different guys?
Yeah.
We're witnessing Steve Kerr's, he's transitioning in front of our very eyes. Where I think he's, early on in the season, he had the commitment to, obviously, and the allegiance to his core. And now we're seeing him, the metamorphosis, if you will, as I drop the 3-syllable words on you, where Steve Kerr is basically saying, you know what, I'm a little slow to the party, but it's time Podziemski, Trace Jackson Davis starts, and that Jonathan Kuminga gets serious run, and I make a commitment to the youth, and have a balance of the leadership of these older players. And it's the mixture of the two that's going to give me a best shot of making a run in the postseason this year.
Yeah, look, I mean, whether you like it or not, and this is maybe more of a reflection of the years past, but Kerr's played more young guys than ever this year. Like, Podziemski's a rookie. He's in the starting lineup. He started 8 games this year. To your point, Trace Jackson Davis supplanted Kevon Looney for a couple games in the starting lineup. Kuminga, because of Draymond's absence, has started now 12 games, and he's playing, around 25 to 30 minutes a game. I mean, look, Andrew Wiggins is on the bench. Andrew Wiggins played 19 points against the worst team in basketball last night. Like, I know that it hasn't happened as quickly as people want it to, and it hasn't happened wholly because Moses Moody looked like he was on his way to a 4th DNP last night. But Kerr is playing the younger guys more than ever. And that's why, like, we're talking about, do you lean all the way into the young guys? Do you lean all the way into the old guys? They're still stuck in the middle. And I think that's the path for this season. But what I think is important is if you're going to lean one way or the other, it should be about next year. Because I don't think this team, as currently constructed, is looking like a championship group. And that was before Chris Paul went down, and that was before Draymond Green's indefinite suspension. Like, one thing that's kind of flown under the radar is up until this injury for Chris Paul, they've been pretty healthy. Like, it's not as if Curry's missed a month. Clay's missed a month. And Draymond, because of his own accord, has missed a month. GP2's been the most injury-prone player on this team. You got a 38-year-old in Chris Paul. I didn't expect him to break his hand, but he's probably going to miss some games at some point. Like, they've been pretty healthy and have been around 500. That doesn't scream title to me. Not that they can't, maybe finagle their way into a deep postseason run, catch a break here, catch a break there, but they were going to need breaks regardless. I mean, you could even make the argument they cut some breaks the year they won the title in 2022. So I think the Warriors are caught at a crossroads right now, and Kerr is doing his best to juggle both sides of the fence. But number one, it's hard, and number two, I don't think he's done a great job of it to this point. So we'll see what happens when Draymond Green inevitably comes back. But for right now, the impact of the Paul injury, I think, provides a lot more minutes for other players, and hopefully they should be younger guys.
Yeah, really quick before we get to the break, by the way, Murillo and Petaluma, stay with us. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. But to your point about the injuries, yes, the Warriors have been healthy. If the last couple of years are any sort of an indicator, and I hate to go here, but there's a good chance that Steph is going to be out at some juncture of this season. And oh my, hold your breath at that point. All right, Murillo, as I mentioned, we'll get to you and the rest of the callers. We're going to wrap up the show in the last half hour. It's Evan Giddings and Dan Avone on Warriors This Week.
Hey, it's Willard for Safeway. Safeway, proudly serving our community since 1926, and I hope proudly serving me like twice a day. I am there constantly, especially this time of year, but that's because they've got everything, such as Sumo Citrus, first of the season, and it is only going to be there for 2 months.
Now back to Warriors This Week on 95.7 The Game.
Welcome back to 95.7 The Game and Warriors This Week. It's Evan Giddings and Dan Avone. We have a final few moments, 25 minutes left in the show before we wrap things up. We're talking about the Golden State Warriors. We're getting into Steve Kerr, Jonathan Kuminga, as you might imagine. The conversation rolls along with your phone calls at 888-957-9570. When we get a chance, we'll get out to San Jose and talk to Scooterman, who joins the conversation. Scooterman wants to talk about Warrior comparisons. Hey, Scoot.
What up, Scoot?
Yeah, I'd like to say I think there's a lot of similarity between genius coaches and poker players. And just as an example, let's talk about Greg Popovich. He got dealt ace queen 10 with Ginobili and Parker and Duncan. And now he's been dealt 2-7 offsuit for a few seasons in a row. So if he's got a career of 2-7 offsuit, he's a genius. I think his job is basically to praise on the.
Scoot, sorry, Scoot. Please call back. You're breaking up there, but point taken. I kind of like that. You know, if you're dealt, two face cards, if you got pocket kings, you got a good hand, but it's also, I think, to his point, like how much money can you make off that hand? How well can you read your opponent at the poker table to force them into thinking that you're bluffing, or to extract a chunk of change, or to read them to see if they might have a better hand depending on the draw, or the river, or the turn. Like, I do think from that perspective it's interesting. And look, Steve Kerr has not been dealt a great hand this year, but I also think you can make the argument to his analogy with poker that Kerr hasn't really done a whole lot with the hands that he has been dealt.
Yeah, I saw that analogy that he was providing. Once again, Scoot, good job here. Was that he was just saying you basically, the team you inherit, right? That's the hand you've been dealt. And think about that. If Steve Kerr doesn't go to the Warriors, just to take you back, 8, 9, 10 years ago, he was on his way to the New York Knicks. Mm-hmm. And the Knicks are still bad, but they were really bad some 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Where's he at if he goes to the New York Knicks? He's sure as hell still not in New York.
I think he admitted it. He said he wouldn't have a job. I'm kind of with him. I don't think he would. I don't think he could succeed in that situation.
Oh, there's no way.
I also think because remember, the guy who was supposed to be in Golden State, or maybe not supposed to, but was certainly given an opportunity, was Stan Van Gundy. But he wanted team control. He wanted personnel decision making. And he ended up going to, I think it was New Orleans, or maybe it was Detroit. And now he's on the sidelines doing television. So it doesn't mean Stan Van Gundy's a bad head coach, but to the caller's point, you are a victim or a beneficiary of your circumstances.
888-957-9570. Mike is in Oakland, California. Hey, Mike.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Good afternoon. So my big question is, how many years has it been since we got our first chip with the big three? It's been, a decade now?
Coming up,
I don't know for sure, but I think
coming up on it, yeah.
Decade. And then let's look back to Mark Jackson's last year as coach, and when we lost in the playoffs to that really good Spurs team too, I want to say. But from what I remember, that was the first time I remember like TNT and everyone around the league saying the Splash Brothers. I want to say that was for sure. How many years has it been since then? I feel like it's been 12, 13 years. So we really got to just look at the time. And I feel like what a lot of people aren't trying to look at is just the longevity. They feel like this is the same team that did it when we first got our first ring against LeBron. And look at LeBron's progression ever since that ring, or ever since that matchup. And look how many, people from our bench over the years have gone to become great starters, and those that aren't. So I feel like it's just, I feel like everyone, ownership, fans, everyone sort of needs to just sit back and sort of just have a nice powwow, a little nice TED talk, and let's discuss the future of the whole organization. I'm going to be a fan until I die. I'm not a Mayweather fan. I was born here in the Bay Area. This is my team no matter what, wherever I travel. And I feel like that's the perspective for a lot of the fan base, even a lot of the bandwagoners, you know what I'm saying? So I just really want you guys' perspective of sort of the comparison, how did Jordan and his Bulls, how long was it, how compared to that 90 or 91 first win to all the way to 98, and other teams that have or haven't done it like that. I feel like we've had very successfulness. We're going to produce great movies, great documentaries going into the future, but we really need to just slow our pace down and sort of just look at the bigger picture. I feel like no one looks at the bigger picture anymore.
And that's where we're at. Ev, I think you touched on this.
Yeah.
We're at those crossroads because all dynasties come to an end. The big question that I don't know that anybody's been able to solve in my lifetime is how do you go from one dynasty to another? How do you make a seamless transition to a dynastic run, whether it's the Celtics back in the day with Bird, McHale, and Parrish, or Magic and company? Any of the dynastic runs that we've witnessed, at least in my lifetime, is how do you keep that train going down the tracks? Maybe you don't win, multiple championships with a new core, but you're still relevant. And maybe the Warriors aren't there yet, but they're not far away.
No, I mean, they're obviously on the back end of the dynasty. I don't think anybody would debate that. But to my knowledge, the only two franchises that have really bridged dynasties are the Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers. And they've done that in separate fashions. Boston primarily through the draft and trades. You look at the teams from the 50s and the 60s and then, of course, into the 80s. And then the Lakers from Showtime and Magic, I guess a little bit before that, they won a championship, were competitive, but, obviously Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal.
I would say Shaquille, to your point, Shaquille, Kobe, that was more of an abridge as opposed to the Celtics where there was a good lapse of maybe a decade or two between titles. When you're talking about Bird, and then I think you're referring to Ray Allen and company, not a decade.
No. I was talking about Bill Russell, and then later on, I wouldn't consider the Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen combination a dynasty.
Not a dynasty, but an NBA championship, I guess. And maybe they're not one and the same. But I don't know if that was as continuous as to.
Oh, definitely not. No.
Like that of the Lakers.
No, but the Lakers also had a couple of lean years in between when Magic retired and then when Shaq came to Tinseltown. I mean, but that was through free agency. I don't know if the Warriors can go out and address that on the free agent market. But no, you're right. Like, dynasties don't typically just resurface immediately. They don't continue. There's a long gap. And to the caller's point about Chicago, where have the Bulls been since Michael Jordan left? Yeah. Like, they've been kind of wallowing and have a couple of big years, but their most successful story has been Derrick Rose since that point. So it's hard to envision life without all of these great players, but that's why if you're talking about, okay, how do you continue it? Well, the answer is you had a chance. You had a chance. You had the second overall pick
I'm with you, man.
In the midst of a dynasty, and you blew it.
How often does that happen?
You blew it.
Right.
I mean, that's and honestly, that's the reason why if we're talking about the 80s Celtics, that's why they blew it also. Now, they blew it for different reasons. Their pick passed away in Len Bias, but that's something you don't get back. Like, the Warriors whiffed on James Wiseman. He was in town last night. You saw where he's at in his career. He wouldn't help the Warriors now. I don't know if he'd help the Warriors in 4 years become a championship team. But when you miss on the number 2 overall pick, you don't get to do that again. Like, the 49ers are freaking lucky that they whiffed on Trey Lance, spent 3 first-round picks, and they fell into a 7th rounder that's going to take them arguably to a Super Bowl. Like, that doesn't happen. What the Warriors did was miss, and you got to lay in the bed that you made for that miss. That's one of the reasons why I would not and cannot give up on Jonathan Kuminga, because he has the most potential. He is the most probable of the young players that they do have to take over the mantelpiece from these guys. I don't think it's fair to expect him to do that, but he's the closest thing they have. He's the closest bridge they have from that championship era into whatever the Warriors are going to become. James Wiseman was a miss, and when you miss on second overall picks, when you don't get them very often, typically dynasties don't continue.
If you could redraft, and you know what Franz Wagner is, and you know what Jonathan Kuminga is, who would you take in that draft?
Well, I mean, at the time, I wanted LaMelo Ball, but I also don't know if he's a guy that you
No, the Jonathan Kuminga.
Oh, the Kuminga draft?
Yeah, so...
no, I would have taken Kuminga.
In front of Wagner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, well, the thing about Kuminga you got to remember, though, is Kuminga was at the beginning of, like, draft season or that year before they went through the season, like, he was expected to be the number one, or he was supposed to be a top 3 pick.
Yeah.
And he fell to 7. So, I didn't have a problem with that pick at all.
888-957-9570. We have a few more minutes left in the show. Let's get back out to the phone calls. And Petaluma and Murillo, who's been hanging on for a while. What's up, Murillo?
Hey guys, how you doing? Thanks for taking my call. I like the mixed match that the station has done recently. It's the more perspective, the better. I actually have an analogy about poker with this team and Steve Kerr. The reason why it's so hard to judge, guys, is because I'm going to get to my analogy. I'm not going to take too much time. This team has always, for years, said that they shared the blame, they shared the responsibility for the winning too. So it's always hard to place a blame. It's hard to place a blame in who picked James Wiseman, which was a mistake. We all knew. That kid has nothing but size. I don't think it's fair to put all this blame in Kerr, and it's easy because it's what we see on the screen. His mistakes are and maybe a turnover here by Steph or a missed layup by Clay. Those are the mistakes we see in the naked eye, and that's the thing we point out to when we're in the emotion post-game, right? I think the blame goes more around because back to the poker analogy, I don't see as Steve Kerr has been given a hand. Steve Kerr has been given 2 bad decks. 2 seasons in a row. Because here's the thing. When we had Durant, we were maybe the top heaviest team in the history of the NBA. We had the 7 to 8 man rotation that nobody could touch, right? Now we're a middle heavy. We have 6 to 7 guys that can go out there, give you 12 to 15, can give you 2 rebounds, 2 assists, but you don't know who you use because you don't have a defined rotation. And I don't know if it's all to blame on Kerr because how much is he to blame for roster construction? I don't know. And here's the funny part, guys, just to close my call. We have 3 untouchable guys, in my opinion, on this trade talk. And there needs to be a trade. There's too many guys. You can't have a 12-man rotation. Steph, of course, Kuminga because of the upside. And the funny thing, stay with me here, Saric, because in the money you're paying for each of these guys, Sarge is the best bargain you have. You're paying him a minimum contract, and he's delivering you a lot. So it's going to be tough, but moves have to be made. Thank you for taking my call.
You had me until Sarge.
Well, I think he means more like Sarge would, I guess, outkick his coverage in a trade because he doesn't make a lot. So
he's also been, to his point, we can't overlook his value to the Warriors this year. But I think when you're talking about untouchable, I'm not. If I'm Mike Dunleavy Jr. and you give me 3 players that you can't touch, and I'm talking to a GM from whatever team in the NBA, Steph, obviously. But you're not touching Podziemski. I'm sorry.
I was about to say, yeah. To me right now, you can't. You wouldn't deal him.
And I don't know that Trace Jackson-Davis is a very close third.
If you were bringing back a big man, like a legitimate, a good one, I think people would be okay with TJD leaving. But you're right. I mean, well, let's face it. And I think to the front office, if the right offer was out there, the only untouchable is Stephen Curry. Like, if you could go out and get Embiid, Kuminga would be gone in a second.
Yeah.
But you're not going to do that. You're not going to get that guy.
All right, we have a few moments left. Back out to the phone lines, and it's Emmanuel in Dublin. Emmanuel, how are you?
Hey, good morning, guys. Hey, a lifelong Warrior fan. I sat through 40 years of absolute bad basketball.
Thank you for your service.
I watched the championship in '75. I've seen a lot of good things. A lot of fans, and I'm kind of noticing the kind of a trend, like when the Giants won their World Series, all the Giants fans were just, saying the world's going to end the way things went, after the last, they kept expecting so much from these teams. Same thing with the Niners back in the late '90s, early '90s when they won their last. Warrior fans are unrealistic. I think the crowd's changed a little bit, not in a good or a bad way. We know the prices of tickets, but I'm sticking it out, good or bad. Sometimes it's even entertaining to see, the Draymond saga or drama, whatever you want to call it, and Coach Kerr talking to Klay Thompson about, where he is mentally, emotionally, physically, whatever you want to call it. I still get a kick out of this team. I don't think the book's written, but I will say I don't think Kuminga is like the end all be all. I mean, if he's a tradable where you can get a stud for him, I would take it. But I don't know what his ceiling is. Is it going to be 16 and 9 or something like that? I don't know. I just don't know about Kuminga, but I'm not going crazy about Kuminga. Anybody's tradable besides the chef. Let's see how the rest of the season plays out. Excuse me. And I like the new guys. I miss JD. He was great on the radio. But you guys are doing a fabulous job. Keep up the good work. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Job, Emmanuel. You know, to his point, Warrior fans are just really spoiled. There's nothing wrong with it, but you know, there's kids. I got a buddy whose kids.
Yeah.
I think he turned 16. So basically, when you're about 4 or 5, you're sort of awake and you know what's going on in this world. So essentially, and he's a big Warrior fan. So essentially, throughout this kid's majority or the extent of his fandom life, the Warriors have either been in finals or have made deep playoff runs, aside from that aberration of a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Listen, man, I'm at the war. I go back in the days where you were in that lottery for a decade plus. Hello, Andres Biedrins and the doldrums that were the Golden State Warriors. So it could be a lot worse, Warrior fans. Just put it in perspective from time to time. Being a game under 500, getting Draymond back, and still being in the conversation of potentially making some damage in the postseason. You'll take it compared to where you could be. Just look any further than your last opponent, that being Detroit, winners of 3 games this year. Hey, let's just get back out to Scooterman. I want to get back to that poker analogy.
Let's get him in.
What's up, buddy?
Hey, guys. So I'm sorry. You never call the game when you're a mile from a tunnel. So, anyway, let's go to 5-card stud. And in 2017, we had pocket aces with Durant and then I think Thompson and Draymond were a pair of 10s, and with maybe Iguodala, but we had a great hand,
a full
amazing
house.
hand. And now this year, right, we're an awesome hand. And this year we're like king. I think Curry's down to a king, and Draymond's a 7. And he's actually a marked up card.
Offsuit.
Scoot, really quick. I'll let you continue, but what's the most you've made in a poker game, and what's the most you've lost in the hand?
Oh, boy.
Oh, I'm kind of a miserable poker player. I played way too much, but I was playing a 20-40 game once and hit a straight flush, and there were two full houses out there. I killed them. Probably about $3,000 in one hand.
Oh, boy.
Drinks on you, bro. Nice job.
Feel free to come by. 888 Kearney.
All right, good job. We've had a couple of poker references. Let's get in one more before we get out of here. Gene's hanging out in Oakland. Gene, what's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, guys. So, I've kind of gone back and forth on the whole Kuminga thing. And right now I'm at a point where I wouldn't mind trading him as long as they could get real value. I mean, a Siakam trade would be okay with me as long as they're not giving up too much. I was thinking if it could have been, Kuminga, Moody, Chris Paul at the time before he got hurt, and maybe even the first round draft pick. I'd be okay with that, because I'm kind of losing faith in the guy. And first of all, he's still not very emotionally mature, and more to the point, he's not playing. He's not a good defender. He's not a good rebounder. The game the other night that we lost to Denver, I'm wondering if the real reason Kerr took him out or didn't play him at the end is because he saw we had a big lead and they needed defense more than offense, and that's why they put Wiggins in. So, anyways, I don't know, and I have to wonder if Steve Kerr himself is maybe getting a little tired of all the drama surrounding this guy. So, anyways, my thoughts.
Good job, Gene. I would have to disagree with you that he is, I think, a better than average defender, and he's actually a guy that wants to take on the best player of the opposing team. So it can be just like anything else. When you're playing well, you play better defense. But I would consider Jonathan Kuminga a good defender. I know we probably don't have enough time left in the show, and you and I might disagree on this, but if I can get Pascal Siakam and Jonathan Kuminga as part of that trade, I think I'd pull the trigger on that, whereas you would not.
I would not, because Siakam is a rental currently, and even if you have to re-sign him, I wouldn't feel comfortable giving Siakam, like he's making 38 now. Yeah. I'm assuming he'd want more, and you probably have to give him 4 years, maybe 3 and a player option. I wouldn't be comfortable giving Siakam 4 for $160, which is probably the range he's going to be in. and that's the going rate. So to me, that's not worth giving up the promise of Jonathan Kuminga.
Jonathan Kuminga certainly has been somebody that's dominated the conversation throughout and will continue to right up until the trade deadline, I'd imagine. Let's just wrap things up with my man Mitch in New Jersey. Mitch, what's on your mind, buddy?
Hey-o.
Hey. How are you guys?
What's up, Mitch?
Yeah, thanks for calling. Happy New Year. Hey, I just say with the unfortunate injury to Chris Paul, I think Moody should get more playing time, show what he's got, and he's a pretty good player. And Draymond Green, that's not much of a punishment. I know things are going fast, but what message are you sending? He needs help, personally.
Fair.
Thanks, Mitch. What's up with the Moses Moody suddenly fan favorite? Did you see this coming?
Well, I don't know if it's that he's a fan favorite, just the fact that fans haven't seen him in like 3 weeks. I mean, I understand why he got DMPs when GP2 came back. The one after against Denver. I mean, Kerr played 9. Like I think there's room for Moody. We're going to see him now, though, because you got minutes to hand out. And Moses Moody's going to get some run, and so I'm excited to see what he can also become because, you know, if you're talking about young pieces you could package in a trade, someone might like him, might say, hey, what if we gave him, 20 to 25 minutes consistently, what he could become?
All right, that's going to do it for us. For my man, Evan Giddings, John, who's going to go play in the rain today. Hit him straight, buddy.
Yeah, good luck.
This is Dan Avone. We'll see you next week right here once again for another edition of Warriors This Week. Until then, enjoy the rest of the day, everyone.
I bet you folks are glad to be done with your shopping. Hopefully, all your gifts went well. But there's one last store to visit, this time just for yourself. Your chance to get one of the top-rated Samsung, LG, or Sony TVs at a crazy low price. Where? At Video Only's year-end clearance sale. A great way to end the year. If you don't check out these deals at Video Only, you'll be sorry.
Guys, are you tired of being tired? Frustrated because it seems impossible to lose belly fat? If you're looking for a solution, then listen to Mark.
I had fantastic results with the Andro 400 Max. Probably lost 35 pounds, and more impressive than that was the inches I lost off of my belly and my waist. And the increased energy is fantastic. I'll be totally honest. I tried a different product, and I wasn't happy with the different product. You guys are considerably cheaper than the other brand, and I can really feel the difference.
Andro 400 Max, the extra-strength, all-natural testosterone booster. The safe, easy, and affordable way to gain energy and lose stubborn belly fat. Satisfaction guaranteed or your money back. Feel and look like a new man. Go to andro400.com or call 888-400-0435. 888-400-0435.
In order for small businesses to thrive, they need to be smart, efficient, savvy, staying ahead of the market at every turn, finding ways to do more with less, and taking advantage of every opportunity that comes their way. That's why Comcast Business is introducing the Small Business Bonus. For a limited time, you can get up to a $1,000 prepaid card when you switch to Comcast Business, the company with the largest, fastest, reliable network. So if you're a small business owner, don't wait. Call or go online to learn about the $1,000 bonus today.
Give your business a head start in 2024. Get started with fast speeds and advanced security for $49.99 a month for 12 months with a 2-year agreement. Call or go online to switch today. Ends 2/21.